Yeah, okay, so that's that. Um, so I invited you because I've known about you for a while.
Mm,
I suppose I should tell people what my podcast is in case this is the first time they've come in. So my podcast is primarily, well, it is focused on conversations. It's focused on conversations that improve me, change me. I assume I will have an audience that will be able to take part in the improvement, but I think if I try to focus as much as possible on how my guest affects me, that'll keep it more honest and more useful. It won't be me doing activism of any kind. It's hard to completely stay away from that, but that's the goal. Um, and also, therefore, I may, just from listening to other podcasts or even like conventional news, um, there are a lot of questions they don't ask that I'd like to ask. And I prefer to err on the side of asking something that is a dumb question or inappropriate question and getting told off for it rather than not asking at all. And then everyone, including me, just wishes that I did. I
okay.
encourage you to ask me questions back or tell me to get lost or anything like that. Um, yeah, and then one particular section of my um, interests is to talk to people that I think would be probably seen by a majority of people as unusual in some way. And the idea is to, as much as possible, again, this is where you go, there's the distinction between activism and just a conversation. When I hear conversations with people that you might consider to be unusual, they often, in more conventional media, jump right, or even on podcasts, jump to what should we think about this? What should we do about this? As opposed to let's just get to know the person, find out what it's like to be them, and then let the viewers make their own decisions. So that's the approach. And I asked you because I'd been following various, I don't know what you want to call it, trans tubers, trans Twitter posters, and so on. And I don't, for a long time, I don't know how long I've been aware of you, but I never really got into your podcast. I probably saw you here and there, but, and then I just have ran into a few things recently, including your, I don't remember all the technical description, but you were talking in front of some bunch of politicians, telling them that
Yes.
you want sports to remain purely for females and not females and males who uh, perhaps would like to be seen as female. I hope I got my males and females right in that. And yeah, and I just thought it seemed solid. I just liked the way you presented it, and so then it reminded me of you. So I started listening to your podcast, and I like the style of it more than anything. And that's something too with this is I'm aiming partly for content, but I think there's a lot of value just from how something is done rather than telling people what to think or giving them facts, just the mood. And so I um, rather spontaneously, it wasn't necessarily the best time for me, sent you a message saying, "Do you want to do this?" And the clip I sent you was trying to convey kind of my goal of having a very relaxed mood where we may or may not learn facts, but you'll just get a sense of people having fun and gain
Mhm.
something from the perspectives that they have or other things about them that may be interesting or of note. Okay. So, oh, I do have another question. I just talked for a whole bunch and I keep meaning to ask people, do I have an accent?
You do have an accent.
Okay. Some people I won't say get mad at me, but have pointed out in the comments that that's a silly question because everyone has an accent and it's a matter of perspective, blah, blah, blah. I know that.
What?
But the point is,
Do I have an accent?
no, that's why I asked the question. Is because I realized that it's not equal. I assumed it would always be equal. If one person sounds like they have it to one, then the other way around. No, life is not fair. Apparently, I just don't hear very well. So
Well, I can't imagine that I have an accent. I speak proper,
exactly,
uniform media. My media accent is correct, right? So you consume all of these things from television.
hmm
And if anybody is playing a character, they, of course, are allowed to have an accent. But all of the respectable
the regular people.
people, yes, all of that accent has been bleached out so that there's supposed to be a uniform way of speaking.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. See, I also like it because it turns the tables. Because rather than me talking to the unusual person and we pretend I'm normal, if I ask about my accent, then for that we're flipping it around and looking at it from the other person's point of view. That's the theory. So how could you
Which,
just
which province are you in?
Ontario? I'm practically in
Ontario.
the States.
I
I'm
see.
told it
So
sounds like an Upper Michigan accent, which
Upper
to me
Michigan.
which to me
Good.
sound or Youper, I believe was how it was described. And I looked it up and it sounds just like a cartoon of a Canadian accent, so that's not too unreasonable. Do I sound like I have a cartoon of a Canadian accent?
No, I've heard Canadians who have a much stronger pronounced Canadian accent.
Yeah, so have I.
Yours is merely subtle.
Okay. Well, I aim to be subtle in most almost all things, so that's good. Okay, so who are you, and is there anything you'd like to tell me or tell people about you? Random things. I do my intros differently every time, so this is completely open.
Well, my name is Corinna Cohn, and I am a Hoosier. That means I live in Indiana, in United States. And I moved here when I was 19 years old, and have lived here on and off for most of my adult life at this point. Let's see here. You, in the introduction, you referred to some testimony I gave to the Indiana legislature in the
Right.
last 2 weeks.
Hmm.
One day I gave it to the House of Representatives as they were considering a bill in committee. More recently, I gave substantially the same testimony in the House, or excuse me, in the Senate, as they were also, and it was a Senate Committee on Education considering the same bill. And the point was that the legislation is attempting to restrict the participation in the sex category of girls and women's sports to individuals who are observed to be biologically female. And I gave testimony in support of that bill because I am somebody who went through male puberty, and I am roughly about the normal height of a man. And I know that in sport and physical activity, that going through puberty is a huge advantage in, especially in a competitive sport. And that I know from firsthand experience that even if your testosterone is suppressed or if you don't make it, that the advantages from going through puberty are still considerable. And I thought that given my own personal experience and knowledge of the topic, that if I were really going to be sincere when I say that I support women and girls, that I should use that experience and inform and educate legislators about the facts of what that advantage entails and ask them to take that into consideration as they're deciding whether or not they want to support a bill, the purpose of which is to support or protect the rights of girls and women to play in on a fair basis in their own sex category.
Right. I don't think I have anything to add to that. Um, Now, there was this thing you wrote for Quillette, which I found a few days ago, and I thought this is perfect. I was trying to figure out exactly how do I want to approach this conversation, and I thought it actually would make a pretty good foundation for it. It goes on for about 10 minutes. I was reading it over earlier today, just and timing it to see how long it takes. But if you don't mind reading it now, I think it would be beneficial perhaps to me, having already read it, maybe not so much, and certainly to anyone who's listening, if that's okay. Is that all right?
Yeah, should we talk about it a little bit and give some context before we jump in?
I, oh, if you'd like, I thought it spoke for itself, but
Oh, okay. Well, I can
whatever
do
you
that.
like.
Well, that's fine. I'm good.
I'm
I think I do want to give a little context for
okay.
it because even if it does speak for itself, for one thing, it appears in an online journal that's called Quillette,
Yes.
which is has been somewhat politicized mostly by its detractors, because if you actually look through the type of content that appears in Quillette, it actually is quite far-ranging. Has everything from literary and film reviews in it to social commentary and political commentary. And there are a wide variety of views published in it. The thing that tends to bring the viewpoints together in Quillette is that they tend to be somewhat heterodox viewpoints from the communities that those topics are arriving from. And so the reason that my article was published in Quillette, or that I approached the editors of Quillette for publication, is that the topics that I speak about in this piece are very personal and related to being trans and transition, but there are viewpoints which are not spoken about very much in the trans community, and I believe are somewhat revealing about the trans experience in ways that possibly most trans people don't want to tackle.
Right. And that actually
So,
reminds me of something I'm glad you reminded me that I want to say about that, which is that um, I have no interest in having you or anyone else on to use you to make a particular point,
mm,
other than that you exist. That is to say, you exist in the sense that you can be trans and have a sense of humor, in case people didn't think that was the case. That you can be trans and be a software developer, in case they didn't think. My point is that I'm interested in your particular
yeah,
perspective. I'm not trying to make a point about everyone thinks this way or should think this way. We can talk more later about how widespread or not you think your perspective is or your experiences have been. I'm just interested because I find it valuable to would find it valuable to talk to you. So yeah, because I know that is a
thank you.
problem, right? I see podcasts where people will, I feel, are using someone who has an heterodox, as you say, view as, as a sort of social weapon, and it's not completely wrong or dirty, but it's a bit shifty or shady. So
That's fair. I do want to clear up two things that you just said, though.
yes,
One is you said that you can be trans and have a sense of humor.
yeah,
Well, as we know, only men can be funny, and therefore, if I want to actually imitate or emulate a woman, part of what I had to do was actually give up anything resembling a sense of humor. So I will be very serious and possibly sometimes emotional during this conversation, but I won't be funny.
okay, that's too bad because what you're
Yeah.
describing is how I might turn out too. I was hoping we could keep this lighthearted, and I was going to
Okay.
rely on you for it, but I did write down some jokes in case it got desperate. Um,
All right. We might need them. The
yeah,
second thing is that you said you can be trans and be a software developer. You might not know this, but if you are trans, you have to actually become a software
yeah,
developer.
actually, yeah, yeah. I should have known that. Yeah, um, that there's a high correlation perhaps there. Um,
There is. I didn't want to, but as soon
you
as I
couldn't
started taking the
resist.
estrogen, well, there's a contract. It's not mentioned in my piece, but it's if you want access to any of the gender therapy, it's part of the deal. It's a form of serfdom. You get your estrogen, but you also have to learn to code.
Now, okay, so that's estrogen, but does it go the other way, or is that a whole different thing? Like,
Yeah, that's a complete
yeah,
for
that's
trans
what
men.
that's what I
Yeah,
thought.
that's totally different.
And there's no connection to the fact that, according to some research, males are more interested in things like software design. Like, there's no connection there.
No, 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 no. This is all. This is just all the contract to get. I would rather really be decorating houses or designing dresses, but no, it's software.
Right.
All right. So with that cleared up, for 32 years, I've tried to become a woman. Here's what I learned along the way. I turned 45 this month. I can't deny that I'm in my middle years. Although I've been blessed so far to avoid noticeable gray hairs, just an update for 2022, I actually have noticeable gray hairs now. So
Your webcam
unfortunately,
doesn't show it, so you're okay.
yeah, just wait for 2023. It'll be evident.
Okay.
Although I've been blessed so far to avoid noticeable gray hairs, there are unmistakable creases around my eyes and forehead. My hands are even picking up the signature wrinkles and definition that I've always associated with old hands. Beyond the outward signs of age, I feel it inside. My peak energy levels are lower than they used to be, and the idea of dashing around makes me tired just thinking about it. The aphorism that you're only as old as you feel may have some truth to it, but one can't just wish away one's age. When I appraise myself in a mirror, looking for signs of aging, I can't help but look for the signs that betray the sex I was born. Male, a bouncing baby boy, and more or less on that trajectory until my early teen years, when I became convinced that I was actually a girl. It was only a short time later that I started taking little purple Premarin pills, and not much later, sex reassignment surgery. The mirror doesn't lie. When I pull my hair back, reducing its feminine effect, it's easy to notice my masculine features, especially my brow ridge. You could even say that I have a masculine jaw, but I promise it's a carbon copy of my mother's. 27 years of estrogen have changed the facade, but the structure is still as nature made it. I could pay a surgeon to grind away bone to smooth the bumps and ridges, but it wouldn't change who I am. Believing otherwise is just wishful thinking. Am I a woman? I used to believe I was. I used to have stars in my eyes. My role model was the Bond girl and self-described transsexual supermodel, Carolyn Cossey. She was gorgeous and glamorous. If she could do it, couldn't I? Me, a socially awkward boy who struggled to find brotherhood in the company of boys, who more easily made friends with girls? Why not? Early in my elementary schooling, it had made sense to see a psychologist discover why I couldn't fit in, why I was constantly a target for bullies. I didn't know that the question was answered and that the issue was larger than myself. I continued to wonder what was wrong with me. Maybe I was not supposed to be a boy. It seemed to solve so much. In the very early days of the modern internet, there was a non-commercial predecessor to Facebook and Twitter called IRC, or Internet Relay Chat. Using login credentials borrowed from a teacher, I used this chat network to seek out help, and I found it. For a misfit like me, finding a group of people who were accepting and validating was amazing, maybe even intoxicating. These people understood me, or if they didn't quite understand me, they would at least listen to me. Crossdressers, transvestites, and transsexuals, people who were gender nonconforming, a community where I belonged, finally. At the time, I didn't think to wonder what type of group I'd fallen in with, or how or why I fit in. Nowadays, when you think about teenagers meeting strangers on the internet, it makes you think of perverts preying on helpless children. While I can say that nobody tried to arrange a meeting for a sexual encounter, I did have a set of admirers. I was told that I was beautiful and that I had the potential to blossom into a beautiful woman. It was attention I wasn't used to. As a high school student, I was still the butt of abuse and the target of bullies. So through my teen years, I lived in two worlds. By day, I was a sulking creep, a mostly friendless loser just trying to make it through a day without being threatened or smacked by the bastards who found it funny. At night, I was celebrated and complimented. I learned how to return compliments and build other people up. I learned how to receive and gain validation. Is that what made me a woman? To be recognized as one by an internet chat group? I was starting to accept that I really was a woman, specifically a transsexual woman. Scientifically, a person with a woman's brain who was born into a man's body. Yes, I realize that's not scientific, but this is what we were telling each other and telling others. Even Caitlyn Jenner has trotted out this trope, born in a man's body. It became the accepted device for explaining our existence as transsexuals. To cure this condition, we were expected to take feminizing hormones and whatever other treatments were necessary to achieve femininity, commonly including hair removal through the process of electrolysis, predating laser depilation, facial feminizing surgery, tracheal shaving to reduce the prominence of the Adam's apple, surgery to change vocal pitch, rib reduction surgery, a list of implants including breast, hip, buttock, and cheek, and finally, sex reassignment surgery. Authenticity can be expensive. Transsexuals would trade recommendations on surgeons, endocrinologists, and psychologists who could easily be persuaded to write letters of recommendation. The transvestites and crossdressers would mostly ignore us, although some of them would wistfully express how they wished they could just go part way. They wanted to retain their male anatomy, an idea the transsexuals couldn't, or pretended they couldn't, understand. Over time, different subgroups formed, and those who wanted to transition partway started to band together under the label transgender. You might be wondering about the women who wanted to transition to become men. They were hardly around. And truth be told, they weren't particularly welcome in a space populated by gender-bending men. Antipathy towards the female sex is the norm in these trans spaces. It's hard to make believe in the presence of the real deal. In my senior year of high school, I lined up a psychologist to help me with transition. Through my online contacts, I also had an endocrinologist to prescribe me estrogen. And I was taking close notes on which surgeons earned the highest scores for vaginoplasty. There were plenty of options, and I started to figure out which types of complications were most common with which surgeries, depending on who performed them. Complications were frequent occurrences, but could easily be rationalized as rare freak accidents. Did these procedures make anyone happier? I can't answer for anyone else, but there were some people who were never satisfied with the changes to their bodies. I imagine that, like me, they could still see the truth reflected in a mirror. After transition was the ultimate goal. After all the hormones and surgeries, I would disappear into society. A woman with a mysterious past. I would go stealth and pretend that I'd never been a boy. Evade all questions about my family. Move to another part of the country. Start a new life. Not even a trans woman. A woman, in fact. That was the plan anyway. It almost worked. At the age of 19, shortly after my sex reassignment surgery, I disappeared from my support forum. I started dating a young man. We had sex, and it was my first time ever. It hurt. My body wasn't made to be penetrated, and the modification to allow this did not result in my ability to experience pleasure. My ability to experience intimacy, and consequently to form intimate relationships, was dramatically harmed by sex reassignment surgery. Yet, I told myself that the sacrifice was worth it. I was 20 now. I was a woman. Before long, I was 21, 22, 23. I threw myself into my work. This was the early 90s, and thanks to my early introduction to the internet, I was positioned to join the very first cohort of web developers. I made friendships, but I always held people at an arm's distance to protect my secret. A wry sense of humor and dry sarcasm became my coping tools. This was supposed to be after transition, but I constantly suffered from the cognitive dissonance attendant with trying to completely bury one's history. Wasn't I a woman? Why was I having breakdowns, overcome by self-loathing and intense loneliness? During these periods, my gender dysphoria was the central aspect of my depression. I was supposed to have been past this. My transition was supposed to be over. I achieved everything I thought I needed. What was holding me back? There was a transgender support group in town. I went a couple of times. I was the youngest by a long shot. It was mostly middle-aged married men who were somewhere along the process of transitioning to be women, like me. Much older, much earlier in the process, but like me. I did not feel any affinity. I was embarrassed by men old enough to be my father, dressing like they were trying to be picked up on a street corner. It scared me. To them, I was lucky. You have a family and children and a career, I thought. I will never have children, and my career is an uphill battle. Yet one told me that he'd trade everything to switch places with me, to become an authentic, real woman like me. 29. I moved to another city and met a transsexual my age who had similar experiences. We, being the only two people in our world who could relate to one another, we dated for a while. She is still a dear friend. In a recent conversation, we agreed that our experiences as teenagers in the trans community was akin to grooming. We see the parallels. She and I are both in our 40s, and we're trying to arrange the pieces to try to make sense of our decision to become women. Are we women, though? Trans women are women, they say. 29, 30. I went to college, finally, then law school, 33. I played a part in a mock trial, a witness with no scripted gender, but a name similar to the one given to me by my parents. One student lawyer slipped from calling me she and her to he and him. I don't think it was intentional. I think she just prepared intensely for the mock trial and didn't anticipate that this witness would be played by me. After the trial, I numbly staggered to my car and wept deeply for an hour. I joined another support group, desperate to find someone else who could understand my experience. I had started transition 15 years earlier, but I was yet to feel like I'd finished. I started to realize there is no finish. We are always in a state of transition. And because I am a transsexual, that will always inform my experience, even new ones. We're going to the Michigan Women's Music Festival, a friend told me. Michfest. I knew this was a women-only space, female-only, unwelcoming to transsexual women like me. I was different. Not just different, male. The invitation made me miserable. I didn't want to impose upon a space where I wasn't welcome. But this invitation made me curious about those radical feminists who seemed so opposed to inviting trans women into their spaces. I wanted to understand what divided us, so I started a blog. Maybe I could create a dialogue with someone who had different ideas. I had no idea what I was getting into. While I wasn't paying attention, a new thing called the transgender community arose to take the place of the thing I'd previously known as simply community. Whereas the community I'd transitioned with was mostly middle-aged white men of all different political views, this new community was mostly middle-aged white men of radically leftist ideology. Before, we had been a group of individuals brought together by an unusual commonality. Now, it's a whole identity movement. What's more, the previous antipathy towards women has become more intense. The word transsexual was judged problematic, though for conflicting reasons. It at once connotes privilege, because it implies a sex change, and debasement, because of its associations with pornographic marketing. Instead, everyone in any stage of transition should use transgender, we were told. And today, that word is open to anyone, regardless of any intention or act of transition. There's no word left to describe my experience. My ignorance of the transgender cuckoo's egg was corrected when I started that blog, which I used to explore the intersection of transgenderism and feminism. While there was heat on both sides of the divide, it was immediately obvious that only one side used threats of violence, violent, often sexual imagery, and harassment as part of its strategy to confront its counterpart. I was shocked by the misogyny coming from my side, and I spoke out against it. Without setting out to do so, I had ended up making friends with some radical feminists and making enemies from transgender activists. Although I didn't see eye to eye with, well, anyone of my new friends, one of my new friends asked me some provocative questions about my womanhood, which I'd been defending as legitimate and authentic. "Why are you ashamed of being a transsexual?" she asked. She was right. I was deeply ashamed. Trans women are women, I wanted to retort. But I knew from everything I'd experienced from the time I'd started, regardless of how I might appear to the people around me, that any part of me that's woman is only skin deep. "Your experiences are valid," she said. It was an epiphany. I didn't have to hate myself. Letting go of my loathing meant also giving up what had been an impossible dream. As a teenager, I made a decision that moved me into a parallel reality, separate from everyone around me. Living in denial of that made me continuously miserable, and sometimes deeply depressed. 39, 40. As I came to accept myself and accept my choices, the depression lifted. I wrote more, trying to work out and understand my life through a different lens. Events and encounters that had previously left me confused and anxious started to make more sense when I'd realized that I'd experienced them as a transsexual and not as a woman. In fact, my spiral of misery was practically an assured outcome given my effort to assert a womanhood that never existed and never can or will. Since then, I've learned I'm not the only transsexual to have this revelation. The transgender community, such as it is, talks about authenticity, about true selves, about becoming ourselves. Why did I need to become a lifelong medical patient and have a dangerous surgery to reveal my authentic self? Was it necessary after all? If transition brought on depression and self loathing, was it really therapeutic? These are fair questions, but the transgender community is not ready to explore them. Yes, there are canned, facile responses at the ready, but they don't reach the heart of the questions. And I'm told you don't speak for the trans community, which is a polite variation of shut up. Now I'm 45, almost certainly more than halfway to wherever I stop. If I keep taking estrogen, I risk a stroke and deep vein clots. If I stop, I risk skeletal deterioration. Teenage me had no way of appreciating the choices middle-aged me would have to make. Do I regret my choices? As a child growing up during the AIDS crisis and watching some of my friends damaged by drug addiction, there's a chance that my choices left me better off than I might otherwise have been. If I regret anything, it's that so few people helped me to understand the weight of my decisions, and that I was discouraged from believing in my own agency. As I watch one glassy-eyed celebrity after another line up to endorse the purity and authenticity of trans identities, I realize that there will be more following after me along the primrose path towards womanhood and manhood. If you're one of them, don't be ashamed of who you are, but own the choices that have taken you to where you are now.
Thank you for reading that. You read a lot better than I could have. Yeah, so that pretty much is a good basis for everything else. Is it odd? This is a somewhat relevant question. Is it odd hearing yourself that much when you're wearing headphones? I've always avoided wearing headphones. I'm thinking if I was talking while wearing headphones, it would sound peculiar.
I'm used to it.
Okay, I guess that's it. I just had to get used to it. Okay. Um. Yeah. Anything? Sorry, I'm in listening mode, so I'm trying to go back
Yeah.
into conversing mode.
You know what was weird about writing that?
What?
That took like an afternoon to write. I probably wrote that in less than 2 hours.
As
And
opposed
just reading it out loud, it took almost 20 minutes to read out loud. So I must have been banging away when I was writing that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not necessarily one to know, but it seemed like it was pretty good writing to me, and like even typos, like so everything has typos now. It's doesn't. I maybe had one. I'm not sure. I don't know. I just thought it was. I just thought it was really good.
Well, my editor, John Kay, did a lot to make sure that
Okay, maybe that's it.
the typos were addressed, and he helped add a little brightness to some of the prose.
Okay, okay. Well, I'm slightly.
He's a good editor.
I'm slightly disappointed, but only slightly. But okay,
Well, that's
so
what editors do.
yeah. So what I've done is I went through and I just highlighted chunks of it that I wanted to ask you about. Yeah, this is more just curiosity. I don't know whether it will add a lot for anyone else. But okay, early in my elementary schooling, I'd been made to see a psychologist to discover why I couldn't fit in, why I was constantly a target for bullies. I didn't know that the question was answered and that it was an issue larger than myself. I don't know what that means.
Yeah, it's subtle, isn't it?
Yeah.
What I didn't want to talk about in that piece necessarily is that for various reasons, I had some delayed social development. One of them is that Probably, I just was going to have delayed social development because of something innate, and part of it is that my parents were not really well positioned to help me catch up with my classmates from a social development level.
Hmm. So
So,
you're saying,
and that wasn't a secret to anybody.
okay, but that has nothing to do with like any of the like it's not a sex related thing. It's not a gender related thing. Particularly, it's just life, so to speak.
That's right. So
Okay.
it
Okay.
was, yeah.
So then, okay, that takes me in a direction I hadn't anticipated. Um, I had assumed that your discomfort and trouble in school had to do with being gay at the time. So is that wrong then, or incomplete?
Well, I was
I guess elementary.
bullied basically from first grade on, maybe kindergarten on. I just don't remember kindergarten very clearly, but certainly from first grade on.
Sure, that helped a lot. Um, okay.
It's not ideal. You know, it's what's interesting is that probably this is a result of some trauma that accumulated over years. But every once in a while, I look up on the internet the names of a couple of my tormentors.
hmm.
And recently, I don't do this every week, right? Every couple of years, it strikes me that I'm curious what they're up to. Last year, while I was doing this, I discovered that one of my primary tormentors died.
Okay. So there's some kind of social progress.
Well, not for my tormentor,
No, less
but
so. Hmm. Okay.
it's really interesting because nowadays when you die, they put up a website for your friends and family to come and leave comments. And some of the comments that were left on this individual's page were very, you grow up, so I don't know that you remain a bully if you started off as a bully, but some of the comments were reflective of somebody who is warm and adventurous and loving. And then there were a couple of other comments that were sort of um, oblique. And one of them was left by another one of my tormentors who talked about how they used to rule the neighborhood when they were children. And that resonates because that's certainly how they acted.
Hmm. Okay.
So it was interesting.
Yeah, I don't know what to do with that information. Um, Another clip. Yes, I realize that's not scientific, but this is what we were telling each other and telling others. Even Caitlyn Jenner has trotted out this trope of born in a man's body, became the accepted device for explaining our existence as transsexuals. So my understanding is that there's some evidence going in every direction for that. Like, but you think no, it's completely bogus? There's no such thing as a masculine brain in a female body, or there's no such thing as a masculine brain, or what? Or it's just not conclusive.
These, yeah, the studies that tend to purport that do not make a good case of differentiating the the samples based on sexual orientation. So some of the studies that say, oh, the trans women are found to have a brain that has some more resemblances to women's brains, have nothing to say about whether what proportion of that population is homosexual or how much of it is heterosexual.
Right.
But and the problem with that is that if there's actually a difference between the brains of homosexuals and heterosexuals and on that count, then what the study purports to show might actually be more accurate to say that there's just a difference between the brains of gay men and straight men.
Right.
And there are some other studies that are in other species where they will influence the fetal development of a mouse or some other um, target organism, mammal, and by doing that, induce behaviors that are more typical to the other sex of that organism.
Hmm.
And that's been extrapolated by some transgender activists to say, well, if in a laboratory you can demonstrate that that this exogenous hormone introduced to the lab creature causes more typical behavior to the other sex, then therefore that means that there's clearly some other process similar to that in humans that's happening. But that's not actually proven. There's no science that proves that that's the case.
So it's just that it might be possible to make gay mice? Is that how I should interpret?
It's you can make male mice that have more typically female sexual behavior, but
Okay.
that doesn't mean that
So-
those mice are female mice, and it doesn't mean that trans women are women.
Um, okay.
I guess you
Okay.
could call them laboratory manufactured transgender mice, which is a little bit different from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but I still think it's deserving of its own cartoon series.
I think it's coming, probably. Well, aren't they already working on the M&Ms? Did you see that? M&Ms or was it Skittles?
No, what is it with the M&Ms?
Well, I barely know. It's something I saw on Twitter, and I decided not to engage with it. But there was
Oh,
rumors.
smart.
I didn't know that they even had personalities or characters, but apparently some
Yeah.
do, and now they've rejigged it so that one's more ambiguous or something.
Oh,
Yeah,
they're gonna have transgender M&Ms.
yeah, I think so.
I guess are those gonna be the ones with nuts or without?
Well, I thought M&Ms all had them, but yeah, I don't know. Yeah, no, I might have been paying. I'm not. You want to check that before you go shouting
All right.
from the, yeah, because I was just something that scrolled by. It could have been someone taking a fit over not much. Okay, so here's a kind of a rough thing that I thought was interesting. You might be wondering about the women who wanted to transition to become men. They were hardly around, and truth be told, they were particularly welcome in a space populated. They were not particularly welcome in a space populated by gender-bending men. Antipathy toward the female sex is the norm in these trans spaces. It's hard to make believe in the presence of the real deal. Is it hard to make believe in the presence of the real deal? That seems almost like a topic of its own.
Is it hard to pretend that you're actually a woman when there's women around?
Yeah,
I think so.
and is that just your opinion, or do other people give reason to believe? I mean, so it seems to me you're saying that causes a significant amount of angst among male to female, transgender, transsexual people.
It does. There are any number of stories of trans women hanging out with friends who complain that when they're hanging out with a mixed sex group, that the girls will get hit on, but not them.
And do you think that's though because people know, or is it like intellectually know and think there's a difference, or is it because there's
Yeah,
out?
even if you're stealth, even if nobody knows that you're trans, as soon as they find out, they treat you differently.
Mhm. Yeah, it's a tricky thing. Um, it's one of the things I'm trying to figure out is as much as possible, independent of all the arguing and political noise, what is the best relationship I could have with someone, male to female, female to male, who's trans? What is that? Not because almost anything by nature of being online or anywhere else, if it's coming to me through some medium, it's people taking positions and making arguments. But that's not the same as figuring out when you're actually interacting with someone who you hopefully want to interact with, as a friend, say, of some sort. How do you actually interact? And what's is it a compromise? Is there a way that just works? Is it appropriate, for example, and I'll ask you this more later, but do you even want me to see you or treat you exactly as a woman? What does that even mean? Do I treat all women exactly the same way? Or do we just figure it out as, people interacting would? Do I treat, so anyways, that's what I'm trying to figure out. But I just thought that's the sort of thing that could start brawls, I would think, is saying that it's hard to make believe in the presence of the real deal. The other thing is, and this is the approach that you take throughout,
Start
and I'm
brawls.
treating it,
Start brawls.
yeah. Well, well, I mean, saying it's hard to make believe in the. Oh, okay, yeah, yeah. I'm not all here right now.
Okay.
Yeah. Is That just seems like a very. Oh no, sorry, I lost what I was saying. What I was saying is, okay, make believe. Is that really the way you see it?
That is,
These are all open questions. There's no
yeah,
implicit.
yeah, yeah. How do I see it? So, yeah, for a long time it was. It was. It was a facade. It was a persona. I didn't know it was. I didn't realize it was. I thought I actually was trying to be genuine. I thought I was trying to project sincerity, but um, the more that you care about how other people perceive you, the more you got to realize that that's actually a front that you're putting up.
It's really hard. Yeah, I mean, it's a hard. Here we are talking in front of cameras, trying to not manage my presentation in the face of that is a challenge. And this to me is like a
I suppose.
or not. I mean, it's for me, but I haven't made that many episodes, right? And I don't make them that often, so I haven't made the torrent I imagined making. So anyway, yeah, no, I can imagine a lot of people would be upset with it being described as make believe, um, and I don't know what to say to that. I mean, to me, I guess there is the question of whether it's helping you to be more yourself or not, right? That's one way to look at it.
I suppose I don't think of it that way anymore, but I think that that's a pretty good cope for a lot of people.
Well, we'll get back to that. Okay, now this again is more straight facts. Complications were frequent occurrences, this is surgery, but could easily be rationalized as rare freak accidents. I've kind of seen this. I haven't looked into it much, but I know that my understanding is that you'll get people who had surgeries they didn't like, and they'll say this is actually much more common than you think. Look out, look out, and then
Hmm.
have other people saying no, it's not such a big deal. You're just scaring people off. So, but how can they be frequent and yet rationalized as rare? Isn't
Because that's irrational.
Okay, but I mean, isn't it in the interest of the people looking at it to make sure that they get what they want out of it?
Yes, absolutely. That's completely every person who wants to have cosmetic surgery to look or appear to be more similar to their cross-sex target, everybody should have the outcomes of those procedures as a very high concern. Everyone should care about it deeply.
And
But that's antithetical to the goal of actually achieving that thing.
sorry, what's that? What?
So the more that you understand about surgery, the more that you hold the the doctors accountable for the results, the more that you ask for there to be published information or long-term studies, all of that is um, contrary to the objective of realizing a fantasy. So in your fantasy, you want everything to work perfectly, and the more that you learn about it, the the worse that's going to do for your fantasy.
Right.
It's like I've never owned a boat, but I understand that there's some sort of joke because I had a friend who was trans who was actually a boat owner. She told me this joke, and she said, "The second happiest day in a man's life is when he buys his first boat, and the happiest day is when he sells it."
Okay. So you do think it's a fantasy then, basically, but not always, but generally.
Oh yeah, having the surgery is part of the fantasy.
And the fantasy is that, as you said, and I thought it was interesting for whatever reason I hadn't thought of it, and quite the way you, I hadn't thought of it very clearly until you said it. Um, I'm jumping down a few questions here, but after transition was the ultimate goal. After all the hormones and surgeries, I would disappear into society, a woman with a mysterious past. I'd go stealth and pretend that I'd never been a boy, evade all questions about my family, move to another part of the country, start a new life, not even a trans woman, a woman, in fact. I never thought through, probably because by the time I would have thought of this, I was already too far into knowing all the details about surgeries and so on. I never thought through what it would be like to do what you're just like the idea of what you're describing. I imagine that people could, if not understand it directly, could understand it by imagining things that they're dissatisfied with their lives and imagining if they could just leave those things and go somewhere else. And the fact that the idea there is that you actually would have essentially made your body a woman's body, or
Hmm.
close enough. Like, women are different from each other, so close enough. Um, and I think I do have in my mind, and we can maybe talk about this more later, that I would expect there to be a sense of there being a male essence or something that goes along with it. But obviously, when you're thinking of that, there isn't that. There's the idea that your brain's female, you're a woman, and then you do that, and now you're all the way. Um, and and yeah, I can actually kind of understand that as a dream, I guess. Um, do you think for some people though it works?
I mean, there's for everybody, there's various levels of outcome, right? I
Hmm.
mean, there's not just one level of outcome. I don't think anybody is whole. I don't think anybody feels like I finished, I'm done, I'm ready to start my new life. I don't think anybody feels that way. But I think some people might have fewer complications. They might have better surgical results. They might just naturally be more passable. So they might be able to blend into society with having fewer occasions where their natal sex is central to their interaction. So I think that there's a variety of outcomes that are possible, but I don't think anybody really feels like they change sex.
But you think that often they think they will feel that?
Yes.
That's what they hope. That's what
Well, we're told that's what we're told will happen, and it's the mean. So this word didn't exist until uh, this morning, I think. We're told it's the mean cis people who
right.
are really the barriers to the completion of our actualization.
Right. Then this leads to something I want to ask you. Actually, it's at the bottom of this. So, it's actually my next question. This is perfect. I made friendships, but I always held people at an arm's distance to protect my secret. Wasn't I a woman? Why was I having breakdowns? This is the worst part. This made me sad to read it. Wasn't I a woman? Why was I having breakdowns, overcome by self loathing and intense loneliness? During those periods, my gender dysphoria was the central aspect of my depression. I was supposed to have been past this. My transition was supposed to be over. I achieved everything I thought I needed. What was holding me back? And so I've put as my question, is this society's fault? Because I know
No, sorry, go ahead.
that's fine. That was it. That was my question. I was hoping you have a longer answer, though.
Yeah, so the expectation that you can achieve something that's impossible is really the cause of that. So it's not how society treats you, it's that self-knowledge. So even if you're in a state of confusion or delusion, however you choose to call it, there's going to be a part of you that knows that, like, I know I'm male. There's always a part of me that knows that I'm male. There's always been a part of me that knows that I'm male. And that is unchangeable, it's immutable. And even when I was trying to really go stealth and blend in and be a woman, the knowledge of that was just, it was crushing.
Did it feel like it was other people's fault?
No, it's never anybody's fault. It's a feeling of worthlessness that comes from um, it's hard to explain, but you can't finish. You can't be done. It's like if you're reading a book and you can't get to the last page. No matter how many pages you turn, you can't get to the last page. That exhaustion, that anxiety, that confusion that comes from turning as many pages as you can and reading through every single one of them dutifully, and you keep turning and you keep turning, and you're told that there's a final chapter, that there's a last page, there's a the end somewhere, but you can't get there. It's like the book is titled How to Become a Woman, and the first few chapters are easy to read, and no matter how far you get, you just can't get to the last chapter of it, so you can't finish it.
So it
I
didn't.
I I like that analogy. I'm going to use that again.
Okay. Um, it's good. I was kind of hoping for more in-depth psychological descriptions, but so at the time throughout your life, it hasn't felt like it was other. You didn't think it was how other people were treating you differently, as you say,
Oh,
from.
they did. Yeah.
But did you think it was a problem? Like, did you ever blame people for it, or did it just
No,
stick?
blame myself.
Okay, what does that mean? Is you
I'm not like, I guess this is one of the things about this sounds like a really lame thing to say, so I apologize. But this is one of the mysterious things about the trans experience that the cis people will never get. Um, no, I can't explain it very well. It's just if if I wanted to flirt with somebody and they didn't reciprocate, it's I wasn't feminine enough, right? If I
so because that's always a possible answer, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah,
That's always the go-to answer, and you never know whether that's really the answer or not.
right.
You're haunted by that theory hypothesis that's the problem, even if it's not, and you can never get rid of that wondering if that's the problem.
Well, you're haunted by knowledge. It's not even theory or hypothesis. You're haunted by knowledge.
But I mean haunted by the fact that you never know whether that was what went wrong in that interaction, or was it just that that's the way it would have been, even if you were 100% female, so to speak.
Right, but you can't be.
Right.
So you still have the knowledge. You cannot eliminate that knowledge.
So do you think if you could, like, if you could wipe the memory, do you think that would actually help?
Well, I like having my memories. All my
Oh,
all
I
my
wasn't
friends are right
suggesting
there.
it. I just
All,
meant
all,
as
all my friends are in my memory.
a hypothetical. I just thought I was getting some traction there. That
You know what's funny is there's actually a document, I think it was in a journal, that explains how to provide care to aged trans people who are starting to have memory issues.
I'm familiar with this issue.
You know, maybe people listening aren't, but you want to explain what the guidance is about?
No, I don't know that. I just mean I recall hearing somewhere sometime that, I mean, I wouldn't have even thought of it probably if I hadn't heard of it. Just the idea
Yeah.
of if you've got, yeah. But I don't
Well,
know if I even heard the.
well, you know what they tell caretakers? This is really grim. You prepared for something grim? All right. Here's what they tell the caretakers for elderly transgender populations. They say your patient may have phases or experiences where they're extremely confused because they don't know why their bodies have changed. And they'll become very agitated because they don't know why they have breasts or why they don't have a penis.
So in fact, it's almost the opposite of what. Yeah, I realize now I'd forgotten that I hadn't thought it through. So that suggests that actually, in the absence of their memory, they almost, I won't say they feel better because I don't know, but that they feel like their fundamental sex rather than what they're aiming for.
Mm-hmm.
Which is curious because, if they're at that age, you'd think they've spent probably a while. Depends, I guess it can transition anytime. So you'd think that like it's been a long time. Um, so that do you interpret that as meaning that there is some fundamental sense actually of what your sex is, or just that's more about memory than it is about detecting your sex?
I would, the way that I see it, and I'm far from an authority on this, so this is just how I process it. The way I see it is that you put a lot of effort into creating your facade. And when you get old and tired and unhealthy, and you're still sort of just holding on, trying to keep the embers of your personality from dying out completely,
Mhm.
that you get down to the last parts of the self. And all of that facade of being trans isn't at that deep level.
Hmm.
It's not essential.
Well, and in fact, that's one of the nice things I find about knowing people who are older is that they can be, more just straightforward and less self-conscious and you know that kind of thing.
Yeah, it would be a blessing to be able to do that when you're younger.
That's the goal. Isn't that what drugs are supposed to be for? Like
Like ayahuasca
yeah, yeah, and not like all of them, but yeah.
or caffeine.
Yeah, I don't know if caffeine will do it. I've had a fair bit of that, and I don't think it's made me that enlightened. Sometimes a little bit, but not a lot.
Yeah,
That's an actually interesting
mushrooms.
point. Have you ever heard about, say, about some mushrooms or some such as a treatment? Like it might sell better than like just therapy. It's okay. You've got
That's interesting.
a year of mushrooms before you transition.
That might be the thing to do is make somebody drop some acid or have some mushrooms or take some ayahuasca before they're allowed to have testosterone or estrogen.
It might at least make them a more interesting software developer.
For the trans women, yes.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. Is there something that the trans men do?
I don't know. Is there something that's yes, there is actually. Oh dear. I'm sorry for my trans men friends, but you have to admit therapy and social work are like the trans guy career paths. It's like software development for trans women is therapy or social work.
That's very manly of them. Um, okay, this is sort of a one-off. We agreed that our experiences as teenagers in the trans community was akin to grooming.
Hmm.
Now, if I was looking for cheap shots, I'd just go with that. But I'm not looking for cheap shots. So, what does that mean?
Grooming?
I mean, I don't mean the word. I mean, yeah. I mean, you say that.
What's is the cheap shot that my hair's not looking all good and I'm not all dressed up with pretty makeup or something? That was the cheap shot. You're laughing. That was the cheap shot.
Okay, now I don't even know what we're talking about. Maybe I'll just read that part again. We
Yeah, yeah,
agreed that
yeah.
our experiences as teenagers in the trans community was akin to grooming.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I've heard that said more recently, but this was a while ago,
Yes.
and you also emphasized that nothing actually happened. And also, this is
Yes,
online, right? This going. So
it
what do you mean?
is.
So how is it akin to grooming?
Well, this is what did you say earlier? Something about starting a brawl. Well, this will certainly start a brawl, or it hasn't yet, but I guess it has before online. Um, there is an aspect of the trans community that certainly is the case for young males who want to become girls or women. That there are older trans women, by and large, those who transition later in life, who set about to enable and validate the younger persons in their community. And in my opinion, it is for a largely it is associated to a sexual interest that they get off on young men transitioning.
That's as far as it goes. They don't do anything with them.
Well, I'm sure they do. There's news articles,
Okay.
not infrequently, of trans women who are prosecuted for sexual crimes, right?
Hmm. But not in this case. I mean, your own case, for example, you're online. You said it never went anywhere. So,
It didn't.
do you think they still get something out of it from that point of view, or
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. That's. I think that's central. I think that's central. I don't think that the act has to be. I don't think the act of intercourse or sexual assault or anything like that has to actually be committed in the real world for these people to still gain sexual satisfaction from it.
so are they saying send me a picture of how great you look in a dress, or
Sometimes, yeah,
hmm,
but I think it's. Do you know what autogynephilia is?
more or less?
Yeah, so autogynephilia is a theory that one of the reasons that there is such a thing as cross-dressing or transvestism, or as we call it today, transgenderism or transsexualism, that the theory is that some men develop an erotic target disorder whereby their erotic target is their female persona. So I think that as part of this autogynephilic paraphilia, that by having them, the men who are or who are affected by this get a sexual charge out of transforming or enabling the transformation of younger men to become feminine, because it is allows them to project their fantasy on another target. It makes it more real for them to project that fantasy on another target. That's my theory. I'm not a sexologist. That's something I believe after having a number of encounters that are very rationally explained by that.
Hmm. Do you have any other thoughts about autogynephilia? Like, I know people. That's one of the things people go back and forth over.
Yeah.
Um, I think partly though it's a problem of um I don't know, people having a problem with it. I don't actually have a problem if someone can manage it. It's their own, whether they view it as a problem or they view it as an orientation, or they view it as a, as you say, a paraphilia, a fetish. As long as they're managing it,
Hmm.
I don't have a problem with it. But I think that's a lot of. I know I asked your opinion. Now I'm giving everybody else mine.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But it seems to me there is generally a problem with various sorts of conditions and whatnot, of people being too touchy about just the thinking that there'll be sort of judgmental baggage that comes along with calling something a
Hmm.
condition or a
Hmm.
fetish or whatever. Like fetish is sort of untechnical sounding. They prefer paraphilia, but I don't have to like it or have an opinion about it. If someone, as I say, I'm not saying even keeps it to themselves. I'm just saying if they manage it, then that's their business, not mine. But
Well, I suppose that might be true, but concede for a moment that what I'm saying has merit. Maybe not in all cases. Maybe only in a subset of cases. My accusation that some men get off on enabling younger men to transition. I'd
right,
say that that's only true for some.
okay.
That doesn't seem contained to me. That doesn't seem like it's not hurting anybody else.
No, no, I'm not making a case for that. I don't mean to
Yeah.
subtly imply that. Um,
Well, the reason I say that is I think that we should have a fairly wide consideration over what sort of activities may or may not be harm inducing.
Mm-hmm.
Like encouraging somebody else to, let's say, get really, really drunk and get in their car and drive. Like um, you're not driving by yourself, right? If you encourage somebody to get drunk and go drive, that's not you driving. That's not even you drinking. But if you're encouraging the sort of behavior that's harmful, I think that there's some liability there.
Well, there certainly is moral liability, whether or not there should be legal liability. I wouldn't know anything about what to do about the legal side of it. Um,
Oh, that's what I meant.
yeah, yeah, but so I just meant I wasn't sure if you had any thoughts about the actual condition itself, um, like whether you know anyone who has it or like it's one of these things where it seems like because people are so embarrassed about it, they don't.
Yeah.
It makes it harder to deal with it, and then it's more likely to become a problem. Also, it sounds like, and correct me if you know more because I don't know much. It sounds like there may be different kinds that are either
Yes.
they put or but well no, my understanding was generally, and this could potentially is a big dirty secret of society, is that fetishes or paraphilias progress. Now, I don't know how common that is. I've heard from a couple medical people that they tend to progress, all of them. That's huge if that's the case, because it's one thing to be, and that potentially they consume the person, like like an addiction may or something like that. So that's a whole separate thing I don't know much about. But if that's the case, then they need all the help that they can get, and so um, yeah. So I wonder if I don't know where I'm going here.
Yeah, no, what you're saying makes sense. And in fact, I read in that piece that for a small amount of time, I was dating somebody else who is a trans woman. And by some of the clinical definitions of what AGP is, that by itself would be considered a sign of autogynephilia.
uh, be, I could take a stab at guessing why, or you could tell me. Um, but
Because even though it was technically a homosexual relationship,
mhm.
that if you are in a, so it depends on how you define homosexual, transsexual, but my understanding of homosexual, transsexual is that it's exclusively homosexual and it's exclusively orientation towards masculine, men.
Right. So this would seem to complicate that.
Yes.
Um,
So I am how to put it? I am sexually oriented towards men. Men are hot,
okay.
but also
Men who look like
loneliness
women.
sucks. What's
Okay.
that?
I said, but also men who look like women.
Men who? Oh no.
Well, I'm just wondering about this incident you're talking about.
Well, it's not an incident. It was a relationship.
Okay.
If you are, if somebody shows interest in you and treats you like you're an attractive person and is flattering and all of that, it makes you want to reciprocate. So you may find yourself dating somebody who you didn't set out to date because you want somebody in your life.
Yeah, and actually, it's interesting the things that can be seductive in that way. I actually have a fair bit of sympathy for getting somewhat potentially off course in that sense. Um, okay, okay, yeah, this is just getting more and more severe here. Um, why are you ashamed of being a transsexual? She asked. She was right. I was deeply ashamed. Why?
Because it's not what guys are supposed to do. Like if a boy says, "What do you want to like?" If somebody asks, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" and a boy says, "I want to be a girl," that's wrong. Bad answer. Don't do that. Very stigmatized. So if you want to avoid that stigmatization, if you want to try to avoid it, you have to try to really rationalize why you're not a boy who made that decision.
Right. I have the feeling, I'm curious to know what you think, that in the unusual sex department, like what people would call LGBT, keep adding letters,
Mm.
there's, at least in public discussion, I don't know what's going on in private discussion, there's been a mistake of emphasizing pride. And what that means is lack of shame. Lack of shame would be a psychological healthy thing. Pride is
Mm.
kind of weird. And it's almost like a euphemism for it, but I think it actually gets lost. And so, and this fits my view perfectly. Like what is useful and compassionate and healthy for people is to try and help them, or for that they can help themselves, work through areas of shame. Anyone across
Yes.
the board, anything. And it might mean they change what they're doing, or it might change how they view it, whatever. I'm not saying one way or the other. But by focusing on celebrating and parade and pride, it's jumping and just trying to get more good stuff. Or in this case, perhaps it's trying to think, oh no, if I'm actually a woman in some fundamental sense, then I don't have to deal with this thing. And but for you at least, you found you couldn't get away from that, so that didn't work. Um, does that theory seem to hold water?
Yes, you explained it quite correctly.
And you think like that's generally in your experience? I don't mean just for you personally, but
I think it's universal, but I don't have any way of proving that.
you at least as much as I do. I'm happy
Yeah.
with anecdote. Um,
Hey, can I ask you? Are you part of the family?
what? Oh,
Oh, you're not. You're not gay.
no, not that
See,
as far as I know.
I knew that by your confused response. What family?
Yeah, I was trying to figure out what the family was.
Yeah, you're not part of the
Oh,
family.
no,
You're
I
not
like
part
to
of
try
you're
and I kind of like to try and keep people guessing on the show, but since you asked me directly, no.
Well, I didn't. I asked you obliquely. But then your reaction revealed it.
Right. Okay. So, why did you want to know?
I'm just curious.
Okay. Do I
Because
seem
the thing
gay? I'm curious about
the
that.
well, you're Canadian. So no, of course not. Canadians are more like a manly, lumberjacky,
Yeah, you can't
you
be gay
know,
and alone.
no, swinging from tree to tree. It's none of that is gay at all.
Yeah. Um, have you seen the Monty Python sketch about
What?
gay
What do you mean?
lumberjacks?
I'm sure I have no idea what you're talking
Okay,
about.
okay, I figured you wouldn't.
But the way that you described the those aspects of shame, that was insightful. So that caused me to be curious to ask.
That's why I have a show. I'm insightful, or at least I think I am. So, anyway, yeah, yeah. That's why I take it as a personal insult when you say that there's some things that I just can't understand about the trans experience because I want to figure it out. Um,
Well, I'm dodging. I'm explaining that it's your fault for asking me something that I can't explain. So see, you reverse it and you say, well, I wish I could explain it to you, but you're not trans, so you couldn't possibly get it. It's really a failure on my part to be clear about it. You
I
can
don't.
you can edit that part out, right?
Yeah,
I don't like these trade secrets being revealed.
I'm of the belief that if you keep talking enough, it'll make sense. It's why I do 3 hour podcasts. I'm trying to make it more interesting. The first introductory video I did with Artemis, who was in that little clip I sent you,
Hmm.
went pretty much 3 hours long, and no one's going to watch it because it's two people they don't know talking for 3 hours about sex and psychology historically. Like, okay, when you were this age, and then this, and why was that, and could it have been this, and it's grinding along, and it's educational to me. But if someone, maybe when we're famous, then two people will go back to it. But so I'm trying to make things more interesting, and I can't clip anything either because it's all one story. It doesn't have little exciting bits you can clip. I might. So with this, I tried to structure it so we could flip some things. But yeah, okay. Well, feel free to ask people about whether pride should be replaced with lack of shame. It's not as catchy for branding, though.
It's not. That's the major thing. I'll tell you something. I'll give you two little anecdotes here.
Mm-hmm.
One is that I'm in Indiana. The major tech employer in town is a company called Salesforce. And during the gay parade, last time that I went to it, 3 or 4 years ago, the largest contingent of people marching in the gay parade were straight people, largely, I assume, who were Salesforce employees. And I assume they're straight because a huge number of people turned out, and I happen to know that when you apply at Salesforce, they don't ask you your sexual orientation. So more than statistical probability, most of those people are gay. The second largest contingent, you want to guess what the second largest contingent was?
Trans.
Nope, it was a church.
Oh, okay. I see. We're going corporate, more or less.
Yeah, corporate church. No, it's all these fucking straight people
Oh yeah.
are so excited to be in the LGBT pride marketing. That's what it is marketing.
Mm-hmm.
So there's one anecdote. All the straight people taking over pride. Second anecdote. On November 23rd, thereabouts, every year is a day which is called the Transgender Day of Remembrance.
Mm-hmm.
And the purpose of this, it was created by somebody whose name will come back to me in a minute, maybe. The purpose of it was for it to be a somber day of reflection on to consider the members of the trans community whose lives ended as a result of violence.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the last time that I went to Trans Day of Remembrance, all the fucking straight people show up and use it as their Instagram opportunity. And this is really important because for many, 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 many years, you would never consider opening a camera at a trans event.
Hmm.
You would never, without taking extra precaution, you would never point a camera at anybody at a trans event. You understand why, right? So, is it like instantly intuitive? You don't out trans people.
Oh,
Even
right,
trans people who you fucking hate, you don't out trans people.
right, right. So the point being, they may go to the event, um, and well, they may or may not necessarily be. I mean, you still don't know that they're trans, but it's more likely because they went to the event, and then
That's
that
right.
means that anywhere else they are in their lives, people will know if it's not if they couldn't
That's right.
otherwise, and it spoils if they're trying to keep it. Yeah.
That's right. So you don't fucking bring goddamn, excuse my language, it makes me angry thinking about it. You don't bring cameras to the fucking transgender day of remembrance. That is completely wrong. So I don't go to that anymore. I'm out as trans, but I don't go to it anymore because the fucking straight people have come and fucked it all up.
Yeah.
Pardon my language. I have some strong feelings about it that make it a little bit more difficult for me to regulate my calm demeanor. But it really sucks.
Before you just blame the straight people, though, it might also be that phones have completely taken over their brains.
No. This was a very, very, very deep violation of the norms. It would never have been 10, 15 years ago, you would never do that.
Do you think, though? I'm just going to throw some ideas out, and then we can move on. See, I'm given the amount of time it took me to understand the problem. If I just wandered along and went to that event, okay, I'd not one for taking pictures, and I have a sort of a natural sense of some kind of decency, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But, but Could it be that there are more people going to that event who don't know anybody there and aren't just trying to be generally supportive, so they're not as aware of the culture and the
Yes, that's exactly it. That's who shows up now.
clueless people showing up? Okay.
Yeah, well, they're allies.
Yes.
They're good people. They're virtuous, supportive, affirming people. And there's a lot of them. There's a lot more of them than there are of us. So it's the same with the parade. It's the same with the gay events. All these supportive, affirming, virtuous people who want to make it very clear, very publicly known that they are supportive, virtuous, affirming people. They show up and they make the whole thing about them.
So you're complaining like your allies outnumber you. You're surrounded on all sides. There's support from every which way. It's horrible. Um,
Not only that, they come with their expectations. They know how they want you to perform. There's a relationship that you are not consensually participating in when you have an ally.
okay,
That is
so
a non, let me say, somebody who calls themselves an ally, that is a non-consensual relationship. I'm gonna go tweet that after this conversation
I'm
because this is
glad
a
I'm
perfect.
that and your transition is a never-ending book. You want to hang on to those.
That one, yeah, I'm not going to tweet that one. I'll save that one for a conversation.
Okay,
But
okay.
yeah, allyship is non-consensual.
Um, yeah, well, that's interesting you put it that way. I hadn't thought of it that way. I mean, I'm of the opinion that it's just ridiculous to call oneself an ally of anything unless maybe you're in an actual battle. I don't expect to ever identify myself in that way, even though I hope to be like the same version of it, but just universally to people. um, until we're mortal enemies, but that'll be personal. um, but going back, okay, yeah. So again, I don't want to gloss over that. You just give a very negative description of allies, and if I just wanted to use that to bash, political correctness and stuff, I could, but I don't want to. So
Mm.
that seems rather remarkable. That you're what how are you expected to perform? How common is this? How much of a problem is this?
Oh, it's horrible. It's becoming more and more common. It's the worst thing. If I retire early, at least a good part of it will be because I don't want to have to work with allies anymore.
Okay.
If I have one person, this hasn't happened yet. This has happened in other settings. It hasn't happened at work yet. If I have one person ask me what my preferred pronouns are, I am going to make sure that that person has something to think about.
Why? What's
Why?
yeah?
Who the fuck? Excuse me. Can I use
You can
foul
say
language?
whatever you want. I'll just
It's
tell my
way
grandmother
past.
not to watch
It's
it.
way past the too late. You can bleep these.
I asked you to read your story, right? So like
You did.
I'm
There's no
of
profanity in it.
I don't know. I'm of the opinion that if you can anything you're talking about,
All right.
profanity isn't all that special. It's just using words that mean graphic things. So as long as it's
Yes.
appropriate in the conversation to talk about graphic things, you can use the profanity. If you're using the profanity, you've just given the other person permission to talk about graphic things.
All right. That's fair. I just I'm somewhat passionate about some of these topics, so I fill in not shouting by using some of these other amygdala pinging phrases.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So I was explaining that you do not ask somebody their pronouns.
Yeah. Okay.
For one thing, it's really phony. If you can't determine whether somebody considers themselves masculine or feminine or male or female or anything like that, if you can't pick up enough social cues, just relax and wait. If somebody uses they them pronouns, you just wait for a second. They'll tell you.
Okay.
Otherwise, don't ask somebody. Because I'll tell you, if you ask me that, especially if you ask me that at work, I'm going to assume that you are asking me that because you want to create a pretext for making my difference the the fact of the matter of my having a discrepancy between my natal sex and my appearance, I'm assuming you're asking me my pronouns to put me on the spot. I assume that that's the whole purpose of it. And so for all of these straight people, all of these heterosexual people, and so-called gay people, to try to normalize this thing of asking for pronouns, that's, in my view, that is really about making trans people, stigmatizing them, about making them stick out.
You don't think it's trying to do the opposite? That is trying to make it
No.
so that it's that if everybody, because that's the push as I understand it. I mean, it's just assumed that I'm off in the jungle under a rock. I read about these things, but I don't experience
Yeah.
them. So I would have thought that the idea was that if it's common, even to ask anybody, then no one will feel like they're being singled out.
Yeah, that's some horse shit, because that's not how it actually works in the real world.
So how it works
The
out?
only people who are, what's that?
So what? It's only the ambiguous people who are being asked, or
It's only the ambiguous people who even want to talk about it. Anybody who transitions and wants to pass as the opposite sex, sure as hell does not want you coming up and asking,
right.
"Are you a boy or girl?" Because that's what the question is. That's just a different coded version of asking somebody, "Are you a boy and a girl?" And the only people who want to be asked that are the ones who have a unusual answer. Nobody wants to be quizzed on what sex they are. That's what that question is.
But okay, I'm not disagreeing. I'm just this is a new perspective, so
Yeah.
I'm chewing on it. If I lost track of my question, it's you know I could say I'm asking you. It couldn't be because I want, for whatever reason. Maybe there's some social cue. Maybe there's something. Um, that I want to refer to you in the way that makes you feel most comfortable, and for some reason I'm unsure.
Yes.
So I'm saying that I'm unsure. I understand how that could be a problem.
Yes.
But then isn't the real push to ask everybody? If you ask everybody, then it'll just be a question. You don't. It's not saying that they don't know what to make of you. It's just saying, I'm supposed to ask you this question. Tell me your answer, and I will say whatever you want. Is that?
Well, ContraPoints had this right. You know who ContraPoints
Yep.
is?
Yep.
ContraPoints is a YouTuber. ContraPoints had this completely dead on. ContraPoints wrote at one point and just got harassed.
Oh yes, this was this was
this.
the beginning of tweets being deleted, right? Which is now a humorous activity if you follow.
Yeah, I'm not that much of a Contra fan. I don't know what that means.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm not a huge one either. I'm curious. I'd be interested to talk to. I prefer Natalie as a name rather than ContraPoints, but yeah, lately the thing is that she'll post a tweet and it's a little bit edgy, like saying I don't, well, like that original one, or at least edgy to some, and then it gets deleted a little bit later. So can you take a picture of these tweets while they're still new, or do they disappear and then they become collector's items, sort of thing? But it's an interest. There's
the NFT of.
That was exactly what somebody said. Yes, yes.
Great.
Yeah, but there's a humorous twist. Like Natalie Wynn's someone I would like to talk to. I'm actually working on sending an email because sometimes I think, what are you talking about? And sometimes I think there's someone in there I could talk to. But anyways, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, Natalie Wynn, ContraPoints, was completely correct, saying nobody asks for pronouns except for when the trans person shows up. That's 100% true.
Okay, so that's partly your evidence for the fact that what they're doing isn't what I'm saying they might be doing.
That's right.
Right.
It's a pretense.
Okay, so if we could just divert momentarily, if everybody asked everybody, if that was a policy you could vote on, would you vote on it? Like, would you? Is it?
I would vote. I'd vote no.
Okay, why? That's what I thought you'd say.
Keep that away from me. Well, here's the other reason: is this is something I believe is 100% true. I think the only people who care about pronouns are the the people who have the funny pronouns.
By funny, you mean not he or him. You mean like the more
Well,
sophisticated ones?
funny would be he.
Right? Is that one yet?
It is actually.
Is
So
that
instead of funny, let me say the bespoke pronoun. The only people who go into this pronoun game shit are the people who have the who in the trans community. The only ones who go in for that are the ones who have the bespoke pronouns
okay?
and the allies.
So let's say, what?
Because they want to make the bespoke pronouns all the topic of the conversation. They want to shift the norms, right? So they are very into the norm shifting. But as somebody who doesn't want to be approached by my colleagues or by people in the line at the grocery store for the sort of details about the clarifications about my natal sex, I don't want people coming up and asking me that shit. Other transsexuals don't want that either. Trans people generally don't want that.
And for that matter, it's not like there aren't ambiguous-looking people who, as far as we know, are not trans, right?
That's right. There are
And
ambiguous.
are we going to go up and ask them?
Yeah.
And more to the point, as far as I know, you don't. As you say, you try and hang back and figure it out.
That's right.
And not ask too many questions, unless it's appropriate.
Right. You pay attention maybe.
Yeah.
You might ask a question like this. You might say, "Hey, what do you do for a living? Are you a software developer or are you a therapist?"
Yeah, actually, there is a good point under that, which is you could actually, if it's appropriate to talk to someone, then you can actually talk to them and probably figure out. I'm thinking, unless you get someone who seems to be a mismatch, like the way they seem to be presenting themselves one way, but they want to be referred to in another way. I don't know. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but yeah, I'm trying to do a good job of not taking sides, or at least not taking sides too fast. There are a few questions I really want to get to. So we're about 16 minutes away from 2 hours. Is that when you want to be done, or?
Let's see what feels natural.
Oh dear, you're talking to someone whose natural seems to be 3 hours. Oh, look at the time. But I'm getting through this, but yeah. I'm trying to see if there's any of this stuff I can skip. Okay, I'm almost done here. Yeah, okay. Okay. Events and encounters that had previously left me confused and anxious started to make more sense when I realized I'd experienced them as a transsexual and not as a woman. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Sure.
From the point of view not just of helping me understand, but that hypothetically someone could be listening who could be like you from the past. So how can we,
Yes.
or even not quite you, but still they might benefit from
Any number of personal or professional relationships are affected by whether the other person in that relationship sees me as female or knows that I'm male. And in the occasions where they were figuring out that I was male and were too polite to say anything, or at least that I was projecting that they had clocked me and were not saying anything, because you don't know the difference. You don't know what's actually happening. That really makes you double guess how you're interacting with that person.
right.
And so if something seems tense or awkward or doesn't go the way that I had hoped it would, or does not develop the way that I wish that it would, there's always that thing at the back of your head, and it's trying to problem solve. And so all those times that I felt bad or felt weird or awkward or not human if I had realized that it just that you know, you're trans, and there's something that is going to be not not good in a relationship if you're not really being an authentic person. And by trying to put yourself forward as a member of the opposite sex when you're not, that is not authentic. That's always going to be something that taints the relationship.
Hmm. So it seems to me the recurring theme um, is that the fact that you know yourself to be male, and the fact that other people may as well, and the fact that you wonder if they do, is continuously a problem. And then the more you can deal with that, the better things are.
Yes.
Okay. Uh, oh yeah, I was curious. Okay, so about regrets. Like, a lot of this reads like it's just you say at the end that you don't seem to outright regret. You say, "Do I regret my choices?" As a child growing up during the AIDS crisis and watching some of my friends damaged by drug addiction, there's a chance that my choices left me better off than I might otherwise have been. If I regret anything, it's that so few people helped me to understand the weight of my decisions and that I was discouraged from believing in my own agency. So it sounds to me like you're not saying straight up that you regret it, but everything else in what you wrote to me says that you do.
Regret requires regret is sort of its own delusion. Because regret is a form of wishful thinking that if only things had been different, things would be better now. I have no idea. I don't know if things would be better or different. Well, they'd be different. I know that would be the case. I don't know if they'd be better. So it'd be really silly for me to say I would be so much better off if I had. There's somebody who I engage with on Twitter on and off who is absolutely certain that if she had transitioned when she was 13, her life would be so much better off now. Well, you don't know that. And I mentioned in that very piece that there's middle-aged trans women who started a transition at the age that I am now, who started then that had fully developed families, that had wealth, that had uh, college, that had fraternities, had children, had had all this stuff, and they believe that they regretted not transitioning earlier because they don't value the things that they have in their place, in the place of early transition. They have all this other amazing stuff. So I think regret is a form of delusion as well.
What comes to mind is a movie where you watch two parallel realities where someone makes a choice early in their life, and you watch the two different versions, and they both wish that they'd made the choice that the other one had. And the fact is that
That's right.
whichever way they went, there were good and bad things.
That's the case. So what the thing that I do have a wish for is that I wish that had been making more informed decisions. And really, in fact, the way that I put it that way is because what I really wish is that for anybody who's in my footsteps, minus 20 years, minus 30 years, that I hope that I can inspire them to try to become better informed before they make choices that they can't reverse. I mean, I've got my material comforts. I've got good friends. I've got some family. I've got an old, fat and grumpy cat. I have my health. I've got I am ambulatory. I do not want for food. I do not want for heat. all of the things that, by most objective measures, that would make for somebody who is healthy and secure. I have all of that stuff. So would I trade all of that to um, for a whole intact male body, but also I have a ongoing drug addiction, or that I'm managing HIV as long as I can? Like, what would I, if I could go back to that point where I made that decision, what would I be getting in trade? I don't know. It could be a lot worse. So I am grateful for the things that I have. I am not taking for granted that I am much better off than many people are. And I don't want to sound selfish by saying, gosh, if only I'd made a different decision, because I value the things that I have, and I value the people who are in my lives. And I wouldn't sacrifice those relationships or those friendships just to make a different decision when I was younger. So I have no idea. It's like pulling a lever on a slot machine. I might have gotten 2 cherries, and I'm mad because I didn't get 3 bells. You know.
Mm.
But most of the time, you don't win anything.
Mm-hmm. How have you been treated post transition? Whenever you decide post is when it's a never ending book. Like,
That's right.
but what I mean is that the sort of discussion I don't want to have would be one which from the start, or from perhaps halfway along, was purely focused on whether people treated you well and what people should do about it and what your rights were. But I don't want to neglect that just because I fall, I go too far in the opposite direction. So I'm curious.
Well, I'm going to grind an axe for a second, because that's a very open-ended question, so I'm going to choose to interpret it.
Whatever.
Great. Um, the people, I tend to be treated very well by most people. By and large. By and large, by most people. The people who tend not to treat me well are the ones who think that I should be, jumping up and flapping my arms so that I get a little fish thrown at me once in a while. And the people who are mad that I'm not the model trans person
I should have
are really the
specified.
ones.
I should have specified in real life. I don't want to count the internet.
I am. That's what I'm talking
Okay,
about.
good. I just wanted
I'm
to
not
make
talking
sure.
about the internet.
Okay, good.
No, and I'll tell you something. And I've heard other trans people say this too, so this might be a little bit surprising, but I think that I have a lot more confidence that people who are politically conservative will treat me better than people who are politically liberal.
Mm-hmm.
Much more confident.
Is
That's based on experience.
but is that because they agree more with what you say, or is that even if you don't even talk any of this stuff, you're just doing stuff?
No, it's because in my experience, and this is ironic because it's not supposed to be this way in the model, but in my experience, conservative people are much more open-minded than liberal people.
Are there limits on that? Do you think that you might be dealing with like the most so-called progressive ones, or like in tech, there might be. Like, I've heard it gets particularly intense there. Is it possible if you found like I don't know who tends to go for what sorts of trades and things, but maybe there's a particular line of work where you could find like moderate liberals. Is it possible you just haven't met those?
Oh yeah. No, it's a spectrum. It's a spectrum. So it's even most people who are left of center treat me really well. It's just the further you get out to the edge, the less trust I have for dealing with people.
Right. So then, if can you, keeping in mind the spectrum, can you make the left-right comparison again, or conservative,
Yes.
liberal, like with more
So
detail?
I have a lot more confidence that I'll be treated well by somebody who's conservative than somebody who's liberal.
So on balance, it doesn't matter that there's the spectrum and that the moderates in the middle are better. Just if you had to, if you had to just blindly choose, you think you'd be better off.
Yeah, if I was on a ship and I had to choose to jump into the boat that was full of liberals, the blue boat, or the red boat that's full of conservatives, I would jump in the red boat.
Hmm. And do you think that's a recent occurrence?
No, I think that this is probably, I don't know for sure, but I think it's always been this way. And I have a explanatory theory for that.
Okay, I just made one up too, but you go first.
All right, let's hear yours.
Okay,
Mine's well formed. So
mine's 10
I'll
seconds
hear
old. Yeah.
yours.
I can't remember what it is. My brain's going to mush. Remember, I mentioned that evening would be a little bit rough. Normally, I do these more like late morning. What was I thinking? I was thinking, okay, you're obviously familiar with Jordan Peterson. You've made some reference to him in something somewhere, right? I don't know how familiar
Right.
you are. You much
A little
familiar
bit.
with him?
I'm a little bit familiar with him.
Oh, okay. I wouldn't be talking to you if it wasn't for him. Because he got me into the whole transgender, transsexual thing. Because that's how
Oh,
he
okay.
I followed him before he was famous. I met him before he was famous. And then when that came up, I watched in horror as I thought he was being completely misunderstood. And so then I watched almost everything that he was in initially, and he talked to he talked to one transgender person, and then also a whole bunch of other people. And then that got me, I ended up watching a whole bunch of transgender YouTubers and trying to figure out what to make of this mess. Um, and for some weird reason, never stopped being interested all these years. Anyways, okay, so the reason I mentioned that is one of his things is that I think this is right. He thinks it's harder for liberals to manage their radicals because it's harder to tell when liberalism goes off the rails, whereas he thinks with conservatism it's clearer when it gets more nationalistic, possibly goes into race stuff. I don't know if that's true, but that was the theory that came to mind, is that maybe liberals have always had trouble with the radicals. I mean, if I had to pick a side, and I don't want to, I would think. Are you familiar with Jonathan Haidt,
Oh yes.
psychologist? Yeah. So if I had to use, I haven't taken the test, but I would guess that I'm somewhere in the middle of all that. But I think I'm probably more liberal in terms of openness and agreeableness, and neuroticism and all those things. Um,
Well, you're mixing the um, you're mixing the two different models. You're mixing the Big Five model that has the um, neuroticism on it. That's what you just
I'm
said, right?
mixing it with
With
his
the
moral
theory of moral
foundations. Oh,
sentiments.
okay. So it was Peterson who did
Yeah,
the.
with the moral foundation set.
Okay, but I could convert it. It would work out. Yeah, it's a little bit more confusing actually when I convert it. But anyways, that's enough of me blabbering. What was your theory?
Um, so I guess my theory could be modeled on the moral foundations, but I think liberals, both sides do this. So I don't want to pretend like conservatives are not participating in this in their own way, but I think liberals are extremely have a extremely strong foundation in identity, and that instead of defining themselves by what they do or by defining themselves in terms of their beliefs, that liberals tend to define themselves very heavily in terms of their identities, and that in liberal world, it's fairly clear cut what an identity involves. And so if you're a black conservative, then that is a violation of your identity. You become an Oreo. If you are an Indian conservative, we just had Razib Khan on, and he joked that he gets called a coconut, or he called himself a coconut, brown on the outside and white on the inside. In liberal, like the further you get to the left, the more that you violate the precepts of what your identity is supposed to entail, the more threatening you become, and threats have to be confronted or canceled. So since I am not the model, trans woman, I think that makes some liberals very agitated, and are prone, not completely. This isn't 100% at all. This is just on the basis of a number of interactions where this has happened.
But
I think
importantly,
liberals.
you're not talking about um, intellectual. You're not talking about how you state some, that outright that you're a male on Twitter, and of course people argue with that. You're saying in regular day-to-day interactions, more or less, that this is what you're finding. So to me, it has more weight.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, I think it's regular day-to-day interactions too. I don't want to. I don't want to. Let me use an anecdote from a previous employer so that I'm not picking on anybody who I have to look at day to day. I worked for a company. The president was gay. He went to South by Southwest, which is a big tech and political shindig in Austin, Texas, when there's not a plague happening. He went to South by Southwest and he met a trans activist who um, the two got talking, and the president of the company got very excited about this idea of having somebody come and give a presentation to our company about how to treat trans people. And it was me. It was a company that had maybe 30 or 40 employees. We wanted to do all the trans training.
But you would be the only person to stand to benefit. You're saying
That's
hypothetically.
right.
Okay. And
That's
he
right.
presumably
So it be,
thought that, like he wasn't wondering about other employees. Like since he wouldn't necessarily know which ones were trans and which ones weren't. But you're saying you think he thought you were the only
yeah,
one.
you can never tell. What's that?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what I need to repeat.
Oh, well, let's just go on.
Yeah.
So he's not doing this to um, stigmatize me. He's not doing this to isolate me. He's not doing this to mark me out as different from my colleagues. He's not doing this for any negative purpose at all. But I had to try to explain to him why doing this would make it so that I couldn't stay at the company if he tried to do it. Because I really need to be judged on the quality of my product. I have to be judged on how well I'm able to manage my interactions with people. And if somebody treats me poorly because they have a prejudice against me because I'm trans, that's actually an aspect of a relationship I need to learn how to manage. I can't run to the principal and say, "Oh, Eric is beating up on me again." I tried that. I did that for years, and that led to a retardation of my social development. Like, you can't go asking other people to solve your problems for you. One of the things that you have to do in order to develop socially is figure out how to manage your own relationships. And the last thing that I wanted was this guy to step in and be a savior for all the right reasons and ruin things for me. And so in his case, he was actually he did listen. It was I give him all the credit because he heard my points and they made sense to him. But I'll tell you that I've had interactions with people who have a very similar mentality. When you try to explain to them why that's a disastrous proposition for somebody like me, they get mad because they want to save you. They get mad because they're trying to be a good person and they're trying to be a good person on your behalf, and you're telling them to mind their own business, and that makes them angry. So they want you to be this model victim, this model person who's getting facing bias in the workplace, and they want to come save you from it. They want to rescue you, and when you tell them, "I don't need that," I'd rather bond with my coworker by going out to the shooting range and knocking down some targets. Oh, I'm not supposed to have guns because I'm supposed to be a good liberal and I'm supposed to hate guns. Well, stop putting me in a box. And conservatives don't put me in a box. I've never had a conservative put me in a box like that. I'm sure there are ones out there who would. But I've never had an interaction with a conservative who does that to me. But I've had interaction with more than one liberal, several, enough to sculpt my attitude about it. Who do that to me?
Does it feel like okay? Now, obviously, I'm going to give the disclaimer. I try to avoid wimpy disclaimers, but I'm going to give one anyway. obviously these are very much generalizations, but I couldn't help but think something I've thought somewhat before, but the way you were describing it, I really thought it, is that the behavior you're blaming on liberals sounds like bad maternal behavior. And what you're describing
That's interesting.
and what you're describing as conservative, or I mean bad at that point, like there's a point where that would be good maternal behavior, and then it becomes bad when you do it when the person's 20. And what you're describing on the conservative side sounds more like reasonable paternal behavior. I don't know if we stand to benefit from giving it that labeling, but the maternal one jumps out at me. And like people, I think of all ages, are trying to get their mothers to stop doing that kind of thing. Like they just keep doing it, even the good ones.
Yeah.
And because what stuck out, and this is where it's not as great a theory, but and this is where I emphasize the bad part of it. I'm not saying it's just what mothers do. I'm saying it's what perhaps it's a way that one can do their mothering indelicately. What you were talking about was a program that would single you out.
Mm-hmm.
That's a bad idea in almost every situation. Like that's not nice. It's not polite. And then I mean, when you're talking about specifically how wanting to be judged by your performance in the company, okay, that's less of an emotional issue to me. It doesn't quite fit into my system so much. But the idea that people want you to be a victim and so on. You said take care of you specifically, or words that were synonymous with that, and yeah, that sounds like that's what that sounds like to me. And so I'm wondering if that's you're talking about when you're mentioning the you thought that it was more liberal to be obsessed with identity. That's an interesting idea. I have not. That doesn't plug into anything I've thought of before. Is that your idea? Have you heard anyone else come up with that?
I don't think it's unique to me at all. I don't know if I've individually gotten there most of the way and was able to articulate it because of somebody else's formulation, but it definitely jives with my experiences.
Okay. Anyways, that's interesting, but I do wonder if it's that partly. I don't know how long it's gone on for because I've only started to pay attention to politics for a little while, and I'm not that old to begin with. But that is one of the ways that liberalism seems to go wrong is in a maternal way, like a bad maternal way. So that's what that seems to be. And that wasn't my original thought. The original thought was that that's actually one of the highest goods. We shift over to the Jonathan Haidt system where caring is the big thing.
Yes.
And that's something I would say I still struggle with because I do think that both in terms of how I've grown up and my personality, like I do see that as being one of the main deals, and probably to a fault. So it's interesting to see it in that, but not to the fault that you're describing. Okay, so I want to move this towards wrapping things up. Okay, so I've got a few main questions. What am I trying to get out of this conversation? How do you see yourself now? How should I see you? When I say should, I mean how would you like me to? Where are we at here?
How should you see me? Well, I mean, hopefully I've put in some pretty dry or sardonic humor. Hopefully there are a couple of things that maybe will hit you later that you go, oh, actually, I get it now.
I meant more specifically, going back to the pronoun business, which I used to think was irrelevant, and then I think is relevant, actually. You can make an argument that you're being polite to say whatever someone wants. You can make the argument that you're trying to control how someone behaves. If you're saying you should, refer to me this way, you can make the further argument that really the core of that feeling is trying to control what somebody thinks and feels.
Yes.
And if I tried harder, I could probably come up with more arguments to the contrary. You can say it costs you nothing to refer to someone by whatever they want. So that's more what I meant.
Do you think that's true?
Which?
That it costs you nothing to refer to somebody?
At present, if we're talking about something like he or she, we're leaving out male, female, more specific ones. all of them at once, or can we? It means something specific to me. I have not needed to have a subtler definition of it than he means male means, and people get into the weeds about what's male. What if you've got this particular, you know, rare medical condition that makes you sort of male and sort of female? And I don't have an answer for that. What I'd say is this is what it's meant so far. So if I feel, this is not a factual argument, this isn't some argument about what you are down to your bone and X, Y, and XX, and no, it's what I would feel is that I'm being a fool for lying if I don't say, when I know it, that a person is this or that. But at the same time, I also feel like I don't want to do that in a way that seems like I'm making a statement. I'm not saying it to in any way against them. It is just trying to satisfy this sort of moral but self-centered "what do I feel" question. And I also am genuinely sometimes lean the other way, where I see someone who in their manner and the way they look convinces me, and so it feels weird to refer to them by their actual sex that I know them to be. And so then I get tied in knots. So then I start calling you up to ask for help. So I'm genuinely hoping. See, I'm going to the people who are confusing me and saying, "Can you help me get unconfused?"
I can't. The couple of times that people have asked me for pronouns, and this hasn't happened in the workplace yet because I'm going to be meaner if somebody does that at work. But the times that it's happened out in public, what I say is this. I say, you are the owner of your words. So what you call me, that's the thing that you chose to call me. And I don't want to be I don't have the responsibility of being the owner of your words. You need to do that.
Well, I wouldn't do what you said just because you told me anyways. I mean, if you told me, I wouldn't do it just because I was told to. But what I'm wondering, though, too, is I'm genuinely curious. Like, I just told you in a vague, muddled way my position. I'm also interested, though. I know on your podcast, which I failed to promote, Heterodorks, very prestigious. Maybe it's just as well I mentioned it towards the end of the podcast rather than the beginning. Especially when one can say there's a shortage of hetero and dorks in the podcast, literally speaking. But Nina Paley, your co-host, calls you he consistently, and I don't, and I know
Yes.
she says that's her policy. Obviously, you don't shrivel up and blow away. Would you?
Yeah, I don't call her he.
Would you be equally at ease? I assume you're relatively at ease if she said she.
Yes.
Okay, so you
She can call me whatever she likes.
right, and I'm going to make the little assumption that the tone and intent is relevant, but other than that, she can call you whatever she likes.
Oh
And
yeah,
yeah.
I made a comment on the podcast recently that it's just fine for us to go out in public and she can call me whatever she likes, but the more that she refers to me as he, and the less that people see me that way, the creates more of a it creates more stigma on her
Mm-hmm.
to do that. If people read me as female in public, it creates more stigma on her to call me he, but she's still free to do that.
Mm-hmm. So you have no general. I'm just curious to know your opinion generally. Like, do you seem to the little extent that I can tell, go by like you've she'd a couple trans women in this conversation. I do believe, 2 or 3. Is that because that's what they want? That's because that's what feels right to you? What?
Um,
You don't have to answer that if you don't want to, because they were in some cases friends, I believe. But I'm just curious.
yeah, I think it was a matter of trying to delay any conversation about how I'm referring to somebody. I
Oh.
mean, I'm trying to minimize your cognitive dissonance by doing that. I think is what's going on.
Okay, so then in practice, that's not something. If you were in an environment where where that was not a concern, you would revert to sex-based pronouns, as they say. I think that's a phrase that just came into my brain.
Well, that's interesting because I think probably now that I'm thinking about it, that my habit normally is to try to minimize the cognitive dissonance in whoever I'm speaking with. So I think I tend to adapt whatever I believe their norm would be.
There is a lot of room for just genuine confusion. Like, it's not like it's an easy answer to go one way or the other. I don't know that there is a
That's
blanket.
true.
There is a blanket policy. I don't think there is one that works, which is why arguing about it is silly.
It is. I'll tell you something though. This concept of misgendering, which is a very modern description or modern word. Um, it used to be very upsetting, and now it's not. Now it's so trivial. It doesn't even like. I made some YouTubers mad. I almost said radical feminist, but she's not. I made a YouTuber mad, and she referred to me all over the place as he. And it took me a while before I even noticed that she was doing that because it had no effect on me. And I was like, oh, well, of course she would do that, but and that's totally fine. But I feel bad for trans people who would have injury from seeing that. There's no need to have injury from seeing that. I guess in Finnish, the language, there's no sexed pronouns in Finnish. Everybody's Han.
Right. But isn't that a new thing?
Isn't that what? A new thing? No, I don't.
Okay.
Well, I don't know.
Well, maybe not Finnish. I thought I heard sometime, maybe more like 10 years ago, that some Nordic country had invented a word that was gender neutral. And I'm not sure if they were bringing it in across the board, which at least solves the problem to some degree. But
yes. The people who feel hurt by it are choosing to feel hurt by it.
Well, okay, hang on.
Is that weird?
It sounds argumentative. I'm having trouble. It's because what I want to say is, at the very least, okay, we're talking about make believe. If you take the make believe view, which is that, and I don't say that with any disdain or anything. If someone is believing that they are actually the opposite sex in some fundamental way, and they're trying to get away from all of this, it's like you're trying to get away from a past of abuse or something, and then people keep bringing it up again, like your previous name. On the one hand, it sounds kind of weak and silly. On the other hand, aren't you invoking some painful mess potentially? You described, not in the written thing. We haven't talked about actual dysphoria really very clearly, but you described disgust at key body parts, like a boil with pus or some such in one of your podcasts. Well, if in a sense you're invoking memories of that by using potentially past names and biological sex. I don't know of any other kind of sex. Let's just call it sex. Does that carry any weight?
It used to.
No, sorry. I mean, does it carry any weight that, like, as far as you said that if you're choosing to be bothered by so-called misgendering, if you're being bothered, and I'm saying, well, but isn't it connected with this miserable past potentially that someone's trying to get away from?
No, I don't think so. I used to maybe think that, but I don't think that anymore.
Is that also because you think you can't get away from it, so you have to integrate it?
Yes, that's a perfect way of saying it. What do you do?
What do I do right now? Not a whole lot.
Are you a therapist?
No,
you do have some nice facial hair. I guess I should ask.
What? Oh, what? What you mean, like in the realm of trans men, or where are we at here? Sometimes I don't know.
Yeah. No, I'm
I'm keeping it well.
You've read Hate, so you at least have some interest in moral foundations. So I'm now trying to figure out some more of your dimensions because you're asking some insightful questions that I would expect from somebody who is at least acquainted with psychology or.
I took like a free, cheap knockoff, Big 5 personality test online, and it told me what I already believed. I don't think much of that test, by the way, because it's self-assessment. But anyways, Um, and yeah, like I was saying, agreeable, open, neurotic, um, not so much the conscientious or what's the other one? I always forget the other one.
Extroverted.
Oh yeah, I think I am extroverted. I just think I had kind of a weird upbringing, so it's taken me a while to work it out.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, I think that's how I come out. That's what I would expect, and that's what it said. So I haven't paid the $10 to do Jordan Peterson's great one, but that's my suspicion. Well,
Wow, he's got the merchandising. Good for him.
yeah, but it's
I got the Jordan Peterson benzos. They're not doing too good for me though.
no, you're
No.
supposed to look out for those. Um,
Yeah.
I'm not,
I apologize. That was mean.
I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do with this.
That was a cut at somebody merchandising themselves. So that was.
Oh yeah, I don't think he'll be merchandising those anytime soon.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, we were talking about something actually interesting a minute ago. Yeah, you was. Oh, I know. You were telling me I was great. That was it. You said I was asking insightful questions. Yeah. Well, that's
Great.
why I have a
No,
pod.
no.
That's why I have a podcast because I figured I could be insightful and I wanted to show it off.
I have a podcast. I'm just a dumbass on it.
Well, I do wish you'd say more. Like even with guests and everything, it still seems like it's about 60% Nina Paley, and then 40% you and.
I'm the pet trans.
Yeah, yeah.
The whole time I'm making my audio engineer notes about all the little ums and uhs that I have to remove.
Oh, that's terrible. To do that. No wonder your podcast is so short. You just leave them in there. It's supposed to be real. We're doing podcasts.
5 to 6 hours.
Yeah, we do podcasts because they're real.
Yeah, if I didn't take out all the times that I was stuttering or that Nina was saying, the podcast would just go on for days.
Okay. Well, yeah, I haven't heard much stuttering on your part today.
When you play it back, you'll hear it just constantly.
Well, I won't play it back. You think I watch these things?
No,
I actually do watch or at least listen to all of them pretty much. There was one I didn't because it was just me and some guy philosophizing, and I just didn't want to listen to it again. Like we're just talking off the tops of our heads. I haven't anything's in there. It ends with him saying he's got to go to the bathroom. Like that's how it goes. And I asked him, "Do you want me to take that out?" He said, "No, I'll just leave it in." So that's more my approach, as minimal as possible.
Well, you asked. I'm going to go back for a second if you don't mind.
No, I would because there was something actually worth talking about.
You didn't get a good answer, so I'll take you back.
Okay.
And you're not going to get a good answer, but I'm going to make you answer.
Okay.
You asked how you should refer to me, or how to think of me. You asked how to think of me.
Yes.
Well, how do you think of me? I can't tell you that. But
I find
I'm curious what you think.
I find it intriguing how I think of you. That's actually partly why I wanted to talk to you, because one of the things that's been a battle in me is that I feel like I am supposed to call transgender people, transsexual people by what they like. Now I haven't met them in person. Okay, that's not true. I've only knowingly met one person. Okay, but I've met a few online, and yeah, so I feel that pull almost no matter what they say that's what I'm supposed to do, and so people who give me the most permission to not do that, then I relax and then I also that means that my resistance to doing it just because I'm being told to do it goes away as well. So there's no resistance. So this seems very psychologically healthy. And so I genuinely, I see you, and I said this actually to Artemis, who I've talked to quite a bit too, as a hybrid. Like I genuinely, especially because you've been whatever you are for longer than you were just a plain old male. So culturally, like in terms of socially, the social construction side of it, you've constructed something. Like you're a genuine mix of biological and psychological stuff. And that's how I actually perceive you. I don't, I agree with you. Said in some podcast, I did a lot of research for this. I've loaded up my phone with your Petrodorks podcast, and I fell asleep to them religiously. You were really good to fall asleep to. It sounds kind of weird, but I hardly heard any of them. I just kept sleeping like night after night. Anyway, so but something I was awake for was you said something like you thought you had. You didn't quite say it this way, but good claim to the non-binary category. I forget why. What I don't know if I even know the reason why you said that, but I think yeah, actually I agree. You can go kind of wacky with that, but I actually don't mind it as a kind of a category, and it's consistent. If you really don't care what people how people refer to you, then that's sort of that actually may be the test. If that's how you know that's how you qualify. Um, so yeah, that's what I would say. That doesn't that and I almost feel I've done this before. I've actually gone back and forth depending on who. Actually, this goes. Sorry, I'm jamming a few sentences together, but this goes back to your thing about the allies being a problem. The times I've felt most pressured to refer to someone transsexual by their new sex, I don't know what to call it, is when I'm talking to somebody else who seems to see them that way. And then I'm just going to throw a whole wrench in the thing. It's a funny thing. Like, here I am talking to people on my podcast, and then I'll talk about the podcast to someone else. And even though in the podcast, partway through, where they never got to, I was saying, oh, I actually see you as the other person sees them as another way. So just to make it easy, I will go that way as well. But what's that? Yeah. Oh, I was saying I could actually imagine I might be able to go both ways with you, and it would feel all right, possibly. Um, I don't know if that's partly just that the way your webcam looks. Like maybe in person, I could go more easily one way or the other.
Oh yeah, I can adjust the lighting here.
Well, I don't know what lighting's good. Like maybe you can have like feminine lighting from one side and masculine lighting from the other. I'm not sure what that would be. But I didn't when I said how should I see you, I didn't mean tell me what I should do with some objective moral standard. I meant if you what would be most comfortable because I want to know what you think, not because I want to know what to do. Do you have an answer to that?
I do. It's the same answer, but I'm going to reformulate it.
Okay.
So I am to some degree an ideologue.
Okay.
And part of that is that I really want people to think for themselves. I really want to empower people to seize the little steering wheel in their brain and drive it around. As Jonathan Haidt would say, there's an elephant and a rider. I want people to understand that there's a rider. They don't just have to make emotional decisions. They don't have to just comply with things. So when I tell people, I want you to choose. They are your words. I want you to choose what you are saying to describe me. That's what makes me feel comfortable is if I can provoke somebody to think for themselves and make a choice based on that. That is the best thing. That's like the best thing for me.
And then one could argue that most likely that means if they're and this would be I don't know if I've fully thought this through or not, but I think I was thinking this that here this would be my argument for indulgently doing what I want irrespective of what trans people want. If I feel right about how I think about you and refer to you and it's all in line within reason, right? I mean, it's not like it's only we're only talking about pronouns for the most part, but is what was I saying? Then I'll hopefully interact with you in a good way. So rather than being some sort of conflict or something, then that should be the best way to interact. And it may still succeed or fail on its merits. But now, do you think there are people who? Okay, this is an interesting question, and let me know when you're sick of talking. Do you think that there are people who are more inclined to genuinely not care how they refer to people? Like to me, I have said to some people, I feel like this would be a lie, and they say, really, I don't care. So do you think that? And I wondered if this was a liberal thing, like they actually are more able to either see you the way they think you want, like you say, this is what I am, and they believe it, or and I don't mean that. Maybe that means that's a great thing. I wonder if it was tied into openness actually, and agreeableness, or is it? What was I going to say? I don't know what I was going to say. Oh yeah. Anyways, or that they just don't feel that strongly about it, or whatever someone says goes. Do you have any sense of that, or do you feel that people
I
actually will?
don't.
Okay, so you don't have a sense of people going against their own feelings, because all of this analysis I've been giving has been based on the idea that there are things I want to say, or that there's one way I want to refer to you or see you, and then I expect it to be different from what you might actually want. But it's that may not be true for other people. They may not experience that difference. I feel like it's the best. It also makes for the best jokes. Like, this is one of the things I've found interesting all along. Is like the whole transgender thing, sex change thing. There's such room for humor if everyone's all right with it. And just
There
look,
is. If you dilate, there's at least 4 to 6 inches worth of humor.
great. Yeah, and I actually know what you mean by that. I'm not going to explain to anyone who's listening. Um, Great. I'm glad there's room for lots of humor. Um, well, I'm glad you're trying to make it funny. Unfortunately, I don't know what to
I
do.
apologize. I apologize. That was crass.
That well, I mean, that is kind of the bulk of the humor that comes to mind, actually. Um,
Yeah,
but
that's much of the trans humor is crass humor.
it,
There's as Miranda Yardley says.
mm-hmm.
Actually, I don't know if he said that. He might not have said that. I might be misquoting Miranda, but I think he has said there actually is something funny about the idea of a man in a dress.
That is not a very original thought. Yes, I mean, so much humor has been based on that, for whatever reason. Oh, that. No, I don't know if my brain's up to going into that. Okay, I want to.
I generally don't wear dresses, by the way.
I kind of noticed that.
So if you get a whole bunch of people showing up saying, "That's just a man in a dress,"
It's
I
no
haven't worn a
dress.
dress in months.
Okay, months isn't that long. I thought you were going to say.
Months. Multiple. I haven't worn a dress since last summer.
Well, summer's when you're supposed to wear dresses, isn't it?
I am not going to try to police when or where people wear dresses, or whether it's a man or a woman in a dress, or whether it's a man who thinks he's a woman in a dress, or a woman who thinks she's a man in a dress.
Okay.
I am too open-minded to do that.
Okay, here's a question, and we just don't have the right mood for me to ask it, and I know you're going to deflect it, but it honestly was, when I went into this, I tried to really think, what do I want to learn from this? And one of the things I was trying to figure out is, how sad should I be? Like, I feel like the thing you wrote, like, it's sad.
Yeah, it doesn't provoke sadness in me. When I was talking earlier about how blessed I feel, how many things that I have that how few pains I have, how many comforts I have, how many lovely people I have in my life, how many good relationships I have, how all of the measures of well-being in my life are so good. I even have a cat. How all of those measures are so in the positive direction. Why would anybody be sad for me? Aside from the fact that I can't experience sexual gratification.
That is one of the reasons, yeah.
All right. Well, aside from that, like everything else is positive, so nobody should feel sad for me.
Okay. I think I'd have to know you more to completely not feel that way. But
All right.
but
Well,
but point
it's
taken. Like yeah.
I've talked about this with some other people before. The fact that I surgically altered my genitals, and that I cannot really experience true or full orgasm, especially not with a partner. That's just been a fact. I thought that I'd be really more authentic and more genuine for some stupid reason as a teenager, that if I had sex reassignment surgery before I had intercourse, if I was saving myself for a partner for that. And So probably for some people, sex, I'm sure, feels very good, and it's probably a great activity for bonding with their partner. It's not something that I've experienced, and I guess when people get profoundly sad about that, that probably is just means that there's an experience that they've had that I can't relate to. Now, I would say if that is actually a thing that people feel, then I would ask them to think about becoming activists on behalf of the children who are being transitioned and who are being placed on hormone blockers and whose bodies are being reshaped and cut up and changed in ways that will prevent them from ever even approaching having any sort of sexual fulfillment, supposing that it's a good thing, from what I hear it might be. That that preventing children from being affected by this, I think, would be one of the greatest things people could do. Because when they start medicalizing children, they're being put on a path to, in the case of natal boys, to have a cessation of their genital development. In the case of girls, atrophy of the vagina and potentially burial of the clitoris and the shaping of a penis over that instead. Like these young people are not going to really, on the whole, experience much in the way of sexual gratification. And if sex really is that important, then we should be mobilizing. Like I guess Billboard Chris is a Canadian. I don't know where. I don't think he's in Ottawa though.
He was.
Yeah, we should be paying attention and realize that if it's really that important for adults, that we should not be condemning these children to a life of being sexual eunuchs.
That seems like a good answer. It's a bit out of place, but actually, a question on the surgery. This is another point that I think goes back and forth. Is how much is it that it doesn't always work out, or often doesn't work out, and how much is it that it just isn't that likely to work that well or not? Because, well, I mean, like how often, how much sensation do these new crafted parts have generally? I don't know if there's a survey for that. Maybe nobody really knows.
I don't think anybody really knows. I know that in the communities when I was part of them, that it was an open secret that people lied about their results. Here's an anecdote. There's a blue checkmark Twitter trans woman who's an actor in Hollywood, and I was having a pretty personal and heated debate on this topic with this individual, who insisted that the vagina that they had was completely the same as any woman's vagina, and then went on to detail about how the only way that they were able to orgasm was through anal sex. And I said, well, that's not vaginal sex. That's not orgasm through normal, like what you would consider heterosexual intercourse. If you're having anal sex and that's the only way that you can orgasm.
Especially.
And this person could not. What's that?
I was going to say, especially for a supposed female. Right? Like that seems like a more male. But that's a separate
That's
thing.
right. So this person is completely delusional about their sexual responsiveness. Completely, wholly. And it's not the first time that I've had a conversation like that. But the number of, I think that if you were to poll how many trans women have regular penis and neo-vagina sex, I bet the number would be astonishingly low.
Okay, well, there's more things I could talk about, but it's late and my brain is just about mush. Is there anything else that you think I could learn from this? How might your experiences help my own psychological development?
Do you have trans people in your life?
No, no. I've only ever, to my knowledge, met one in person, and that was because I went out
Oh,
of my way to find them. Um, this is a YouTuber.
well, I think that having this conversation with me is going to perhaps strongly color your future interactions.
Well, I mean, nothing you've said has been earth shaking, right? I mean, I'm talking to you because I already know the territory fairly well, right? Um,
Right.
and I'm specifically, to some degree, playing devil's advocate with my questioning. So there's some interesting. It's not like. Well, it depends where you're headed with that, but anyways, yes. Just um, I think you were going to say a bit more. So you think yes?
I wasn't. You corrected me.
Okay. Um, yeah. So I mean, I definitely. I'm wondering if there's. I don't know if it's even a real question. It's like a old-fashioned news question. Can you wrap this up with a bow and tell me what I should have learned from this? Um, but I mean, do you think are things in particular that you have learned as a result of this particular path that are useful in general for people to think about?
I think so. I just can't relate them very well.
Well, that's because it needs more
So,
3-hour podcasts. That's why.
well,
That's
I had some sort of revelation. That's probably a really bad word for it. Epiphany is probably a better word for it. That caused me to just stop having gender identity, stop feeling like I had to put up the pretense, all of this sort of stuff. That is extremely freeing, extremely, when you don't have to front about things, it makes you feel like a more of a whole person, right? You don't have to be different people to different people anymore. You can just be the same person everywhere all the time. And I think that there's a lot of people, doesn't matter if you're trans or not, I think that most people spend a lot of time trying to get their persona crafted correctly so that they have good interactions with people. And I think as a result of transitioning, I think I have probably got to uh, that state that you see from maybe older people, senior citizens who just don't care anymore, and they seem really happy about it. I think I got there a lot earlier.
hmm, interesting. So, as you've said elsewhere, the estrogen makes you look younger, but it also makes you wiser. Whoops! But okay. I thought I just destroyed the window, but I
Oh,
didn't.
no, no, not at all. I don't. I don't. I hope the estrogen didn't make me wiser. I hope that was me.
Right.
Um,
I don't mean directly. I mean, yeah.
yeah.
Uh,
Well,
uh,
testosterone does make you stupider, so I think maybe
mm-hmm.
there is a correlation.
Often it seems to.
That's not a slight against you. That's a slight against therapists.
Why is that? What?
That's
What?
a
what
that's a callback to trans men because they take testosterone and they're
right. Okay.
therapists.
And then they become
That's right.
dumber therapists.
Yeah, I had to explain that. That wasn't a good callback.
I don't know. It may just be that my brain's going too much. It's all right.
Not at all.
Um. Oh, anyways, yes. One other thing I was gonna say, and I've lost track of what it was. But maybe that's enough now. Despite being slightly peculiar at times, I'm very glad we talked. Um, and yeah, I'd be interested in talking more at some time if you're so inclined or not. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, maybe in the future I'll have more short, focused ones. But I just thought that, well, what I said, I thought that I got the feeling that you take a very open approach to, like, the way you just said it is pretty good towards gender identity, and I thought it would be interesting to talk with someone who does that in a very straightforward way. Um, I don't know if I have a gender identity or not. I don't know if people do, like, normally. Um, I have wondered whether, in fact, to be transgender or have gender dysphoria is to be particularly concerned with it. I should also mention that I was homeschooled, so a lot of that early stuff is missing. A lot of.
I see. So you also had some social development.
It still hasn't happened. You
Yeah.
could probably tell.
Not at all. What is your age? Do you mind if I ask?
Not at all. Just 33. Just as of recently.
33. All right. Well, it wasn't until my mid-20s that I really started catching on to how to treat people around me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that mostly people catch on to that in their single digits.
Have you been diagnosed with any sort of autism?
I have not.
Okay, I just thought I'd ask.
Do I come across that way?
I don't know. I haven't met enough
Was
people.
I rocking back and forth?
Well, I do that. I move a lot. I have wondered about myself, actually. No, I just thought I'd add it to the stereotypes, trans software developer, autism.
Yeah.
You mentioned early
Yeah.
developmental stuff and stuff. I thought, why not throw that in there? I
Yeah,
thought
you didn't ask me which what my persona is.
No, I didn't.
I'm kidding. I don't.
I don't. What is that?
Rounding out the stereotype.
Oh, okay. I guess that's a furry thing.
Yeah.
Is that what they call them? Personas?
Yeah, that's what they call their. I would have said like spirit animals. I think that's more intriguing, but they call it persona.
You sure it's not just being fun? Because that just sounds like it's just goofing around.
I don't know. I don't have any direct
insight. Okay.
Contact with that group, so I might have this wrong. The article that I read in the Atlantic might have been mistaken about it. I think they're called personas, though.
I'm sure some people call them that.
You should get a furry on here.
Well, my general rule is that in theory I'll talk to anyone who I think I can talk to. So I get a sense of what they're like, and okay, is this someone I can imagine having a conversation? I even play it in my head. Can I imagine this? So that's the thing. Is it someone that I'm afraid of? Is it someone that I just like? I wasn't sure just in terms of personalities how we do, whether it be, and it was a little bit clunky sometimes. So that was a good call. But like that's the general idea. Is if I think we can have a decent conversation, then I'm interested. And if we can't, then there's really no point.
Well, if you've made it this far, then please leave a comment down below as to whether or not you believe that this was a good conversation. And then like and subscribe. And hit the bell for notifications.
And watch Heterodorks.
Yes, go to heterodorks.com and start listening to the podcasts in reverse order. Listen to the most recent first.
Oh, is that how you should do it?
Oh yes, because they get better over time.
So you go from good to worse? I mean, so you advise
There's
me to
a
listen.
tendency. It's a tendency. So we're saving our very best guests for way in the future.
Right.
But you can listen to some of the okay ones right now.
Okay. So should we not even bother with the really early ones? Like if they just.
No, I would start at episode 14 specifically.
Okay, I don't even know the number of the ones I was listening to. I like the jingle at the beginning. I need a jingle. I think that's good.
You need a jingle. Well, you'll have to invite Nina on and ask her to compose one for you.
Oh, did she compose? Or did she just do that?
Well, she did that one.
Okay, I'm not sure what
Heterodorks.
you call that composing, but okay, yeah. Well, I sort of do, so
Well-
I think I should try. I got like stuff composers have, like little keyboards and stuff. I just haven't been using it, so I may do something with that. Anyway, okay. With that great, exciting ending, I'm about ready to collapse. So.
All right, you should when you edit this, you should put your new jingle at the end.
That's how I'm gonna have a jingle at the end as a reward for if anybody makes it that far.
That's right.
Okay. Is there anything else? I'll put any information within reason that you want me to put in the description. If it's not too dirty, I'll put a link to your podcast. I'll put a link to that article. The dilation diameters, etc.
Just link to the podcast. That should be good.
Yeah, and Twitter, I guess too, right?
Yeah, sure. That's fine.
Yeah. Okay.
If I haven't gotten suspended yet for making somebody mad.
Well, so far so good. Okay. Thanks a lot, and hope to talk to you later sometime.
Thank you for the invitation.